like, Jordan? Fire ass beats. I see that. Jimmy Cam. All right, welcome in. We are joining you a half hour early, thanks to Yahoo, as we have the official Yahoo Deeper Dive in the NBA, the full Deeper Dive coming your way at the top of the hour, live before lock after that. So we have you fully prepared for the next 2.5 hours leading you up to this slate. And we, meaning myself and Greg Ehrenberg here, hanging out. Jordan is producing. We'll tell you all about Yahoo soon to come. My friend, I feel like we just did a show together earlier, right? So it's right back at it today again. And look, it's a tight, short slate tonight. A bunch of injuries as well to look at. And then we have to factor in Yahoo, a little bit different than the other sites.
Yeah, and a lot. It's not like for people who aren't familiar with Yahoo, we do have some a good partnership with them to take advantage of, which gets you some free membership over to Awesemo, which Eitan will read about later. But I mean, in terms of general DFS concepts, if anybody hasn't played on Yahoo, it's generally the same thing. It's not anything crazy in terms of different rule set. In terms of different rule sets, it uses the same scoring as FanDuel. But yeah, 3-game slate and a lot of value plays that we're going to like on FanDuel and DraftKings. We're going to like on Yahoo as well.
Let's look at, if we can, kind of how you were approaching the slate specifically. We have a couple of big name injuries to deal with. Sixers, it continues to pile up, although Tobias Harris is expected back tonight. Jimmy Butler out, Pascal Siakam out. So how are you looking at it? And normally, how do you approach these shorter slates where you only have 3 tonight, these 3 to 5-game slates, as opposed to having a lot of opportunities to choose from? You mentioned there's still a lot of value here on this slate.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of 3-game slates, it's kind of a lot of fair price and there isn't that many value options, but we've had so many players that have gotten ruled out today. We still have Seth Curry is listed as questionable to play. Max Strus is questionable. Markieff Morris is questionable. Neither of us give a care about those guys. They don't matter whatsoever. But Pascal Siakam, he is out for rest. We've got Joel Embiid. He's obviously out. And then the big one, Jimmy Butler, he got hurt last night. He is not going to be playing tonight. So those are, some pretty substantial injuries that we're looking at on this slate. And and I also forgot to mention that Karis LeVert has officially been ruled out. He was questionable earlier today with a back injury. So, there's only 3 games on the slate, but of the games that we have, Toronto, Philly, both sides of that game, significant injury stuff. Indiana versus Utah, nothing on Utah side. Karis LeVert out for the Pacers. And then the final game of the slate, Lakers Heat, and we've got Jimmy Butler out for the Heat. So, ultimately, we're looking at some kind of value in every single game tonight. And in some cases, like the first game of slate, Toronto and Philly, there's value on both sides.
How much does cost? And I understand nothing is ever constant and universal throughout the board. So things change depending on the game and players each night, each slate. But when we only have 6 teams, in this case, the 3 games, how much is cost impacting your decision tonight, as opposed to maybe with a larger slate, there'd be more of a push for a stars and scrubs maybe type of build?
So here's one of the things about this slate is there aren't really that many stars to get to. I have the highest projected player for me tonight, and the highest projected player that we have, or actually second highest projected player over that we have in our projections at Awesemo, is Andre Drummond. And, this guy was a back of the note that none of us considered for DFS a week ago. And then the only other true pay-up option, or actually the only real true pay-up options on the slate, we have Domantas Sabonis at $46. Don't love the matchup for him against the Jazz. And then we've got Paul George really in a price tier of his own at $49, who I think certainly does make sense in spots where we have value to pay up for him. But with that said, there just aren't that many guys to pay up for to make it a real stars and scrubs type night. So there are a lot of guys I'm looking at with increased usage due to the injury news. Guys like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo for the Heat. They're not traditional value plays in terms of being punt options, but they're a little bit underpriced from a points per dollar perspective. So pretty strong slate to build around the mid-range, in my opinion.
Yeah, we'll get to Drummond by all means as we go around position by position. This might be the only time in the history that he's going to be up to $35 on the slate. So let's start at the 1 here. Let's start at the point, Greg, and we'll bounce around a little bit. We do have a couple of guys here in that 30 range with Van Vliet, Malcolm Brogdon. You mentioned Karis LeVert out. And then with Lowry, Tyrese Maxey is a guy that I really like. $23, not expensive when you look at what we're doing across the board. So for me, Maxey, just because even if Harris plays, which we expect, and Seth Curry plays, which could be the case, it doesn't hurt him by all means. But there may be a better option or two that you see on the board here.
Yeah, so I have my player pool built for Yahoo, and I feel like it's fairly set in stone just from a standpoint of we got the key injuries that we're waiting for earlier in the day. The only player that really matters is still listed as questionable is Seth Curry. And if Seth Curry's out, then I think we have to give Tyrese Maxey a few extra minutes. And I'm sure that you are aware of it as a Sixer who's not only a Sixers fan, but a Sixers fan who's wearing an excellent sweatshirt today that was gifted to you as free swag by the Philadelphia 76ers to show how loyal you are to them.
I don't say anything negative about them, Greg. I don't know if you know that.
No, there's no. What is there negative to say? Ben Simmons, best point guard of all time. He's Oscar
They're handling
Robertson.
it great. Yes.
Yeah, Joel Embiid's never been hurt. Meanwhile, they're winning games. All this aside,
Right.
but the minutes load for Tyrese Maxey in recent games with all these injuries, this team is playing 8-man rotations in recent nights. And as a result, here's Tyrese Maxey's playing time over the last few games: 37, 45, 44, 39, 39 minutes. Now, Tobias Harris has been out. Joel Embiid's been out. He is still going to remain out. And Seth Curry missed last game. I have to think these minutes go down a little bit for Tyrese Maxey because there's no other way for them to go. So if Seth Curry's in with Tobias Harris back, I think we probably see Tyrese Maxey a little bit closer to 30 minutes than what he's played. So that would cause me to dial back his projection a little bit. But what I'm really looking at on this slate is look at the other guys we have to compare to Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey is $23, and we're talking about point guards right now. Kyle Lowry also $23, and he has no Jimmy Butler in there today. So we're going to expect a little bit bigger role from Kyle Lowry tonight. Reggie Jackson is $21. I have him projected for more fantasy points than Tyrese Maxey. And then Mike Conley is $21. I also have him projected for more fantasy points than Tyrese Maxey right now. Tyrese Maxey points per dollar certainly looks like a good option, but there's a lot of guys in this price range that I have as slightly better options.
Is there anybody super low? And again, I'll reinforce this point. It's something that you've brought up with me when we've done shows in the NBA across the board, deeper dive or lock, where the slate is shorter. There's no need to go low. We're not forced to punt probably across the board here in all 5 positions. But I'm curious, is there anybody, and I would say below Shake Milton, that we have here? Although I will say that if Curry is out, Shake may get a little bit more play because you're right. I think Maxey's minutes could drop, but look, $17 to $23, it's not that big of a drop. Is there anybody that even caught your eye from a low cost value standpoint? Again, you don't have to go that way. I was just curious if you were looking at anybody in that line.
You know, it's funny when you first said low cost, my answer was going to be Shake Milton at $17. When you said below Shake Milton, which kind of takes him off the table for that consideration. And the thing about this slate is, like we were talking about before, we've got Paul George at that board. There just aren't other guys to pay up for. So when we get into, the forward position, I think that there are some cheaper guys that we could consider, although not really as strong considerations. But yeah, point guard, the only guy that I'm getting any exposure to that's priced below $20 is Shake Milton at 17.
Why Shake? And I'm just curious. I'm not anti the pick by any means. I'm just curious why Shake appealed to you.
Yeah, so last 4 games for Shake Milton, we've seen him play 42, 35, 34 minutes. There was one game where he came off the bench and played 22 minutes. So once again, it's going to be a little dependent on what the Sixers starting lineup looks like and probably whether Seth Curry is in or out. If Seth Curry's out, I expect Shake Milton to start again, and then he has pretty good upside in terms of playing time. But in his 3 starts we've seen from him in those games, 36 fantasy points, 39, and 32.8. So it's really a situation of right now, I think there's a pretty good chance that Seth Curry is going to be out. I don't know that for sure. But if Shake Milton starts, he's a really good option. I don't really have a whole lot of interest in it if he comes off the bench, though.
All right, let's look at the 2. I think you're right, by the way, just where the Sixers playing recently and that foot injury being a non-COVID thing that's decimated the team. I don't think they're in a rush by any means to play Seth Curry. So let's look now at the 2 spot, and we'll keep that in mind in the backdrop. He's a GTD. He is also, to be known, listed at $15. But look, you mentioned Tyler Hero from the jump. $23 seems like a really good place to start here with the 2.
Yeah, kind of a no-brainer for me at $23. He stands to gain the most in terms of playing time without Jimmy Butler on the court. And this year, if we look at Tyler Hero's numbers, without Butler on the court, 27% usage rate. He scores 31.14 Yahoo points per 36 minutes. So Tyler Hero, who played a big role last night in an overtime game against the Lakers, a game that the Heat ultimately fell short in, but his price hasn't changed at all. He was $23 yesterday. He's $23 today because the pricing for today's slate came out during last night's game when Jimmy Butler got hurt. So just classic case of a guy stepping into a bigger role due to an injury and being a little bit undervalued here. As is this year, Tyler Hero's played a much bigger role off the bench. He's the betting favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year, and very justifiably so at this point. 42 minutes last night. That was obviously aided by overtime, but once again, I think it's pretty likely we're seeing like 34 to 36 minutes from Tyler Hero tonight.
Anybody else? I know it's a no-brainer here, and even if it's ownership or if it's a way to pivot, was there anybody else you were looking at as we should just at least mention Donovan Mitchell as far as why maybe you'd be off him. $37. That's a significant hike in salary for what you're getting with Spider as opposed to even Hero there at 23. I don't know if you looked a little lower. Duarte still at $19 tonight, or anybody in that regard. Again, if Seth Curry is out, all of a sudden Furkan Korkmaz may be a little bit more appealing at $17.
That guy. Korkmaz in general played well this year, but boy, did he suck last game. That was so. Yes. Korkmaz last game, he played 45 minutes. But do you know how impossible this is? Across all DFS platforms, he was cheap. Yahoo, FanDuel, DraftKings, very minimal salary on Furkan Korkmaz, where he was priced. I think it was $14 or $15 on Yahoo. Right? He was $4,900 on DraftKings. You tell me somebody at that price is going to play 45 minutes and take 18 shots. There's just no way they fail. But this dude managed to do it. He missed basically all the shots he took. He went 2 of 18 from the field, 1 of 12 from 3, and most of them were open looks too. He was getting some good looks at the basket. And it was just brick, air ball, brick, and it was like, oh my god, what is this dude doing out here? To your point about Korkmaz. Oh yeah. So to your point about Korkmaz, if he starts, could he be viable? I guess, except Tobias Harris is back in the picture. Seth Curry potentially back in the picture. There's just less shots and playing time to go around. So I'm a little more bearish on Furkan Korkmaz. Not somebody I'm super high on right now. You mentioned Donovan Mitchell on the high end. I don't have an issue getting to him right now. I'm a little bit overweight relative to what our projections are for what the field is expected to roster Donovan Mitchell at. We just don't have that many guys to pay up for on this slate, and it's still a fairly reasonable salary for him at $37. If you look at his salary so far this year, he's generally been $39 or $40. So we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in salary, honestly, with a lot of value. And my favorite punt play on the slate over at Yahoo, Duncan Robinson's only $10. Duncan Robinson also, he played 45 minutes last night with Jimmy Butler getting injured. So Duncan Robinson, min price, I expect him to play a massive role.
Yeah, and a better performance in those minutes than even Korkmaz. So imagine that. It's possible to happen. So basically, we're getting to Hero. We're getting to another guy in that $20 range, and in the point guard spot, you mentioned Lowry, Mike Conley as well. And then at that guard slot, which we have, it leaves room for Mitchell, where you say you're overweight to the field a little bit. So that's a spot I imagine that we could slot him in, since we've looked at the 2 and the point already. So we can move to the 3. Just wanted to clarify that, right? As far as an opportunity for you to still slot Donovan Mitchell in either at the guard or the utility, depending on how you're looking at the center as well.
Yep, correct.
Okay. So let's go to the 3 spot. And again, if you're just joining us or hanging with us, we appreciate you riding. We're going to give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. If you haven't signed up already with Yahoo, click below on that link. You're also going to get above that $10 free. That's just for you to hang out at Yahoo and spend it as you may. But if you're new and you haven't done that, then get the $10 free. Sign up. We're going to give you the 1 month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Just hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already, and make sure you're subscribed here to the DFS channel, as we have lock deeper dive coming your way, then live before lock. All right, let's look at the 3 here. And again, we'll get to what happens with Harrison, the center spot, but Jimmy Butler, the big one, out. Karis LeVert also out. So you're looking at now Paul George as really the only spend up opportunity. OG and George, that's an $18 difference as far as what you're spending on. So I don't know if you're going to spend it all on George, or with the injuries here, maybe maneuver a little bit less as far as cost option?
Yeah, those are my two favorite guys to get to at the small forward position. Paul George, just because, like we were talking about before, there's a lot of value on this slate. And let's say Duncan Robinson has a big game. Let's say that Tyler Hero has a big game, and there just aren't that many guys to pay up for. It's just Paul George, as long as he has an okay game by his standards, there's a pretty good chance he lands in the optimal lineup just because the price becomes less important. The raw points become more important when you just kind of easily get to him at $49, and we have plays who are $21, $23, in Duncan Robinson's case, $10, that make it kind of easy to spend up. So this is a slate that, like I was saying before, it makes a lot of sense to build in the mid-range because there's a lack of pay-up options. But if you need to pay up for somebody, there's nobody to go to other than Paul George. So he just kind of naturally makes it into a lot of lineups for me. And then as for OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam recently returned to the Toronto Raptors, and that's slightly cut into OG Anunoby's overall production. So he was averaging close to 40 fantasy points in the first couple weeks of the season. Siakam comes back with the OG Anunoby score under 30 fantasy points in back-to-back games, the only time that it happened to him the entire season. But once again, Pascal Siakam resting today since this is the tail end of a back-to-back. So I expect Anunoby to be back at the production he had from the beginning of the year. So him and Paul George, the two small forwards I'm building around.
Can you even get to anybody else? I mean, if you look at, I'm sure that you can make an argument for Bogdanovich. I mean, Danny Green, I guess if Seth Curry doesn't play, he's going to be rolled out there, that they'll electrocute him to get his body going and then put him out there for a couple of minutes. But I mean, there's so many guys who have been banged up, and there's such a small amount of middle ground here. To your point about George and OG, that may be just a lot of it off circumstance on this slate.
Yeah. And I mean, so it's a 3-game slate, right? So we get to a spot where if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you're playing 150 lineups, you're not going to only have OG Anunoby and Paul George in your player pool, but there's nobody else I really like a significant amount of. Bojan Bogdanovic at $19. Sure, he's reasonable. If you absolutely need to punt it at small forward, Luke Kennard, $10, whatever. Joe Ingles, $11. But I don't love any of these guys. These are just people to mix and match in a little bit. The primary play is Anunoby and Paul George.
Look, if you're running 150 lineups tonight, I'll say this: don't play Danny Green.
Yeah. you know what's funny is there are spots where I actually thought Danny Green made some sense as of late when everybody was out for the Philadelphia 76ers, but they've got guys back now. So I'm on the same page with you. Danny Green, not the best points from a fantasy producer. Not him.
Yes, that's the theme for Danny Green, not him. I'm just shocked that he's at $14. I thought he'd come in at least around that $10 to $11, but that's fine. We don't need to worry about him. None of us, at least, are rolling with him tonight. All right, so the 4 makes it a little interesting here because, again, from a cost standpoint, we have Sabonis right there at the top. Tobias Harris reinserted in the Sixers lineup. He was coming off of COVID, and he was dealing with it, Greg. There were a lot of people that have had COVID. They're fine. They come back. Everything we got from the team, including the head coach, mind you, Tobias Harris went through it physically. And that should be something we discuss for somebody returning his first night into the lineup. And then you get into Scotty Barnes, the only guy in that $20 range. And then we start to get into some value. Again, the slate short, 6 teams to choose from. I don't guess that you're racing to go down on the value spot. So let's start at the top with Sabonis as the high cost guy. And then also the factoring of Tobias Harris coming back to the lineup.
Yeah, so I don't really like Sabonis for this slate. I don't have very many lineups for the minute. He just doesn't project very well for me. Really difficult matchup for him on the road in Utah. Utah is one of the best defenses in the NBA and has had for a number of years, basically since Gobert's been on the team. He's been the best defensive player in the NBA for the last 5 years or so. So I'm not really getting to Domantas Sabonis. If I have to pay up for somebody, I'm just going to take Paul George instead of Sabonis. The power forwards I really like, number 1 is Scotty Barnes. That just obvious with Pascal Siakam out. Barnes has been ridiculously good in his rookie season. So I think at points per dollar perspective, he rates out really well, really underpriced at $25 on Yahoo. And talk about the mid-range plays from before, he's one of the top ones to look at on the slate. I really like Tobias Harris, but he's so difficult to project. I just don't really know what to do because, like you said, the situation with COVID, he was apparently significantly sick. And we don't know if that's going to affect his performance. We're going to know after the game's over, and it's going to seem really obvious in hindsight. Either Tobias Harris is going to go out there, he's going to look like shit, maybe he'll play limited minutes, we'll be like, of course, he was just sick. or he's going to go out. He's going to play really well. He's going to have all the usage in the world with Embiid out. And we're going to go, of course, Tobias Harris is going to have a big game with everybody out for the Philadelphia 76ers. But I just don't really know. I tend to think this is what I want to do. Whatever his projected ownership ends up being, I'm just going to try to even myself with the field because I think he is excellent. He's an excellent play, but there's a wide range of outcomes here. There's a lot of unknowns. I know that you have your ties to Philly. You got your free swag from the team. Maybe they send you some inside scoop, which I know that's not the case. But do you have any kind of a sense here in terms of what we could expect from Tobias Harris, at least from a minutes perspective? In terms of play, who knows? But do you think they're going to limit his minutes at all?
I do. I honestly do. I think the Sixers, two reasons. One, it's something we both have said here. This was not just a quick cough and he's back on there. He was dealing with significant symptoms, and it's a respiratory virus. It's something that has definitely had an effect on his breathing, his lungs, his conditioning. I don't think, not to say that he's out of condition by any means, I don't think that you can expect 40 minutes tonight against the Raptors. I would imagine that he's probably going to be capped somewhere around 30 would be my guess, where if he's out there 25 to 30 minutes tonight, even if they're winning or losing, I think that's inconsequential to your point, Greg. And here's the other thing real quick, if I can add this. You brought this up. I can't remember if it was pre-show or right when we started talking about Maxey. I think it was when we started talking about Maxey. Yeah. They're playing well without everybody out there. That's, I think, something Doc Rivers will rely on, especially tonight, where he can cap Tobias Harris minutes and know that his team is still going to be competitive because they've already shown that. I wouldn't trust Harris minutes over 30 tonight, personally.
Yeah, it's really tough to say. And the other thing, too, is I've been saying this about Doc Rivers a lot this year. You know what Doc Rivers is? He's a dirty, filthy liar. He goes and he talks to the press and he gives out no accurate information. The one I always go back to is that slate last year where Joel Embiid's listed as questionable in the injury report. Reporter before the game asked Doc Rivers, what's the status of Joel Embiid? And I'm paraphrasing here. Basically, what is the status of Joel Embiid's knee? Is he going to play tonight? And Doc Rivers goes, knee? What are you talking about? I didn't know there was anything wrong with Joel Embiid. So everybody just assumes, all right, Joel Embiid's playing tonight. Game starts. The lineups are already locked on DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo. The game's about to start. Team's about to take a tip. Joel Embiid not on the court. He ends up he's not playing. He's not in there today. So this Doc Rivers character, right? He's not to be trusted. No. So I would like to say let's see if we get a report on Tobias Harris's minutes. But I can't even trust whatever Doc Rivers says. And if I'm being honest, and other than just trying to make fun of Doc Rivers, I think Doc Rivers might not truly know. It could really be a situation where Tobias Harris goes out and plays if he feels good. He plays his normal role in minutes. If he goes out, if he's struggling a little bit, if he doesn't feel his conditioning is up to par, then maybe they dial him back a little bit. I think it's pretty reasonable to think the 76ers probably don't even know what to expect from Tobias Harris's minutes right now.
Real quick, just to follow up on this, and again, it's not like we're talking at length about Torrey Craig or Paul Reed tonight. So Harris is definitely going to be an impact player on the slate. I don't want it to turn into the Harris show, but my last question about him is, outside of the obvious factors of COVID and coming back from COVID, if this were any injury and we were just looking at a guy with a risk of coming back, is 37 fantasy points on average even worth taking a risk tonight?
Well, I haven't projected above that, but yeah, okay. I mean, yes, that would make, I mean, if we're projecting for 37 fantasy points, that would make him one of the best plays on the slate for his salary.
Okay. And that's why I wanted to clear up there. Embiid is out. Andre Drummond, we have projected as the second highest performer tonight. Guy will probably have 25, 26 rebounds when it's all said and done. The price is starting to reflect that now, especially on a shorter slate. So I'll ask you here as we hit the final position, as we wind down final couple of minutes, Greg, are you rostering Drummond? Are you overweight to the field on Drummond, or another pathway maybe at the center spot? We do have a couple of big names and four other guys, in that 30+ range.
Yeah, so Drummond and Bam Adebayo are like 1A and 1B to me today, because Drummond, he's obviously been ridiculously good from a fantasy perspective without Joel Embiid. But then Bam Adebayo, you look at his numbers this year, the Jimmy Butler off the court, and they are also absolutely ridiculous, the kind of production. The offense is almost entirely going through Bam Adebayo and Butler's off the court this year. Now, it's a very limited sample size. Bam Adebayo has only played 85 minutes without Butler on the court this year, but in those minutes, 32.2% usage rate. He scores 56.29 Yahoo points per 36 minutes. So with that in mind, Bam Adebayo and Andre Drummond, I don't think you could go wrong with either of these guys. I think they are clearly two of the top overall options on the slate. So that makes up most of my center. My center exposure is those two, Drummond and Adebayo. Minimal interest in guys like Rudy Gobert and Miles Turner for the defensive stat upside. If you need to punt with somebody, Precious Achiuwa stands to benefit from the absence of Pascal Siakam. But the main guys to play at center, it's going to be Adebayo and Drummond.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of tonight with the 3 games, 6 teams. You don't need to overthink it by any means, and I don't think you need to race to grab punts. I don't think we've had one, even if it's a mid-range cost guy that we talked about earlier positions, there hasn't been one really race to find value. Not to say that value doesn't exist as far as, hey, what you're paying to what you're getting back. I meant it more so like in that punt range.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, Duncan Robinson at $10 is the one guy that I think makes a lot of sense. But in general, yeah, it's a slate that I think makes a lot of sense to build lineups in the mid range for today.
All right, so still to come, we are locked, and we have you throughout the night here, leading up to this slate locking. You've got, and thanks again to Yahoo, Greg and Adam come your way, so you're not going anywhere, just like everybody else out there isn't going anywhere by any means. And then we'll have Lock with Lofty and Savoca coming your way after that. Adam's Deep Dive is always free each and every day, so make sure you take full advantage of that. And speaking of taking advantage, we have 2 links for you below, those Yahoo links. $10 free, just free for clicking that link, and you can jump in and play. And then also, if you're new and you're still on the fence for whatever reason, jump in, sign up with Yahoo, and we'll give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum free. All right, my friend, more work for you. I'm out of here, so enjoy it. Have fun with Adam. Thanks to everybody. Hit that thumbs up button as you continue to hang. Don't go anywhere, as Greg and Adam come your way right now with a full deeper dive.
look, it's me again. I was gone for about 4.5 minutes. Now I'm right back here. This time I'm going to be hosting the NBA Deeper Dive. We just did the Yahoo show. This show still sponsored by Yahoo, but now we're breaking down the FanDuel, the DraftKings slate. And by the way, something that I missed that happened in the middle of last show, I didn't notice that Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero were both downgraded to questionable. I was not really expecting or anticipating there to be news while we were in the middle of that show, but we now have Bam Adebayo questionable, Tyler Hero questionable. That is in addition to Jimmy Butler having already been ruled out. Now, Adam, how does this impact how you're viewing the slate, especially because this game starts at 10:30?
Well, it's sure as hell making it so I plan on being back from the bar in time to late swap for the Miami game. But it's kind of tough because I find these situations really difficult because, like, it's tempting to just say, okay, well, I think it's pretty likely Bam doesn't play. Like, if I had to guess, Bam sits and Hero plays. But I'm not confident in that at all. And the problem is if I project Bam out, I'm going to end up with like 100% Dwayne Dedmon. And if Bam gets ruled in, I'm going to have nowhere to go except like PJ Tucker or Dwayne Dedmon as a backup. So that's really a problem. So I'm leaning more towards projecting those guys in. It's a 3-game slate with Jimmy Butler out. They're going to look good. So I know that if I project them in, I'm going to get a lot of Tyler Hero. I'm going to get a lot of Bam. It's going to be very easy to swap around if you are on them and they get ruled out at, let's say, 10 p.m. It's going to be easy to get down to Bam, to get, Hero to Kyle Lowry, to do whatever you need to do. I think it's just going to be easier. It's going to set up for easier late swaps to approach it that way, I think, than vice versa and risk just getting completely screwed with, Dwayne Dedmon and PJ Tucker.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what's really hard too is, just in terms of some of these value plays, in terms of the cheap ends, I guess they'll be viable. I mean, they're certainly going to be viable, but how many roster spots do we want to save for a situation where you could get totally screwed on value? I think Duncan Robinson is somebody who is going to make, some sense, especially over on Yahoo, who sponsors the show where he's min price. But in terms of pay up options, Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, these are two of the best overall plays on the slate without Jimmy Butler in action. So it could be a situation where almost guessing is going to be pivotal. But I'm going to ask you this situation too. How do you think you'll approach just building your lineups in terms of exposing yourself to Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, should they both be questionable heading into lock, which is most likely going to be the case?
Yeah, my plan right now is just to treat them as if they're in. If they end up playing, which I don't think is necessarily super likely, that both of them play, but if they end up playing, then obviously I won't need to do anything. But again, it just makes it easier to late swap, I think, if I do that, because the only real issue is you have the Chris Boucher piece starting at 7 p.m. He's someone, obviously we'll talk about it more in depth when we get to Toronto, but that's one spot where, if I knew for sure Dwayne Dedmon starting, I would have a lot less Chris Boucher than I probably will end up with if I project Bam to play. But other than that, it's not like there's, at least right now, really cheap pieces on Toronto or Philly that I care about that much. You get the next game starting at 9. There's a decent chance we have Miami news by then. But I just think that it's still going to be easier. Like if I assume those guys start, I'm just going to end up getting, because like you said, they're going to be really, really good plays. I'm just going to end up getting a ton of them. And if they get ruled out, it's not that big of a deal for me to just get more of the guys on the Clippers that are going to look pretty good, to get more guys from Miami when we really know who's playing. So I'm treating it for now. I'm planning on treating it as if they're in, just because of how I think it's going to shake out. And I think that's the easiest path to me late swapping later on.
Yeah, and then one other thing, because also I'm just kind of thinking this through as it happens, kind of recent news, and they were listed as questionable early in the day, then they were expected to play, and now they're listed as questionable again. And one thing that does kind of stand out is there's only one true pay-up option on the slate in terms of a really expensive play, and that is Paul George. He's 10,200 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, Paul George is 10,300. If extra value opens up from the Heat guys, I guess the real way to go here is just, hey, some of that Bam Adebayo becomes Paul George, and then one of your cheap plays just becomes a cheaper play like a Dwayne Dedmon or something like that. And that's kind of, I think, the easy trade-off is finding other ways to get up to Paul George. But once again, we'll see how the news breaks and how it comes. Maybe the guys on live before lock after us, they'll have a better luck with injury news, and they'll be able to give you some updates on what's actually happening as that comes along. All the more reason you guys should be liking this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, guys, if you are going to be here, stick around. In the middle of the show, Adam and I, we're going to be doing a giveaway. We're going to be giving away 3 Awesemo Plus monthly memberships through OddsShopper. So we're going to be playing a little game later and doing some giveaways. So tune in, make sure you're listening so you could participate in that later. But let's get into these games now. And starting with, we might as well start with Toronto, their side of the game, because you were just bringing up the Chris Boucher situation. We have Toronto on the road in Philly. Now with the Toronto Raptors, tail end of a back-to-back. So Pascal Siakam coming off of a shoulder injury, he is going to be resting. My assumption here is I think that we see Precious Achiuwa get the biggest bump. We've not really seen Boucher even in earlier games this season when Siakam was out. Boucher's yet to play over 20 minutes this season, but do you think this is a chance that we see a Boucher game today?
I think so, just because I don't really know what else they can do. But the issue is that Nick Nurse has made it pretty clear that he kind of goes out of his way not to play Chris Boucher a lot of minutes. And so it makes it tough because, like, with Birch and Siakam out, I think it makes sense for Boucher to be the backup center. The problem is that it's not like Philadelphia could play small. This game could definitely just turn into like, if Harris is in, Tobias Harris is the backup center and Scotty Barnes is the backup center. Like, they still don't have to play Boucher, but I think it's likely that you're getting at least like 14, 15 minutes or so. At 3,200 on DraftKings, that's going to make him look like a pretty good value on a slate of this size. On FanDuel, he's a little bit more expensive. You would probably need a little bit more production from him, but I'm going to get to some. He's still not projecting like a crazy good play. I have him at like 16 to 17 DraftKings points.
So for me, the guy is going to be Precious Achiuwa. This season with Precious, he's been a pretty good points per minute producer. He's been inconsistent, but still, he's playing 23.7 minutes per game, averaging 22.96 DraftKings points. And what's weird about his playing time? The last game without Siakam, Precious Achiuwa started and played 18 minutes. Then the two games that Siakam was back, he plays 27 and 25 minutes. So the minutes are definitely a little bit wonky for Precious Achiuwa. But with that said, I think there's a pretty considerable amount of upside here with him. So he is going to be the guy, at least for now, assuming he starts, that I'd be looking at in cash games for cheap. He is $4,900 on DraftKings. On DK, he's $4,200, only a center eligibility, which inhibits him a little bit. It's different situations, FanDuel versus DraftKings. FanDuel is a little more expensive, multi-positional eligible. DraftKings, $4,900, only center eligible. There are a lot of good center plays to look at, particularly if Bam Adebayo's in. But how do you look at Precious Achiuwa as a cheap center play relative to some of the expensive options we have to choose from?
Yeah, I'm with you as far as thinking he's a good value. It does hurt that he's only a center on DraftKings because you once again have Andre Drummond playing. You have one of Bam or Adebayo looking like an elite option. Rudy Gobert looks good. And then, even guys like Miles Turner and Zubats are always playable. So even on a 3-game slate, it does kind of suck giving up a center position. But Achiuwa produces at a good rate when he's on the floor. He's at about 0.95 DraftKings points per minute this year. The issues for him playing time wise have been, for one, Khem Birch at times just steals minutes, and two, he tends to get in foul trouble. The foul risk is still obviously there going up against Andre Drummond and the Sixers, but you have no Khem Birch behind him. You have no Siakam. We know that Nick Nurse absolutely hates Chris Boucher apparently. So if Achiuwa were able to just play without fouling, I think he could play like low to mid 30s here. I don't think that's where he should be projected. I don't think that's the median outcome because fouls do exist. But I think it's kind of a situation where he could play a lot of minutes if he's able to stay out of foul trouble. And so then his median projection, if it's 26 to 28 minutes somewhere in there, that's still going to look good at around the fantasy point per minute at 4,200.
Yep. No, that's where I'm at too, is just trying to look at some of the cheaper plays to get to on the slate. Duncan Robinson, he's going to be very popular, but he played over 40 minutes last night. Now you consider all these injuries for the Heat. There's massive upside potential in minutes for Duncan Robinson. And those are really the two safe, cheap plays that I'm looking at right now are Precious Achiuwa and Duncan Robinson. Like you said, Chris Boucher is somebody who could potentially be in the mix. Although, are you kind of surprised by the amount of ownership that we're currently seeing go to Boucher, considering just the lack of playing time he's gotten this year?
No, because people absolutely love Chris Boucher. Like any chance that people get to talk themselves into rostering Chris Boucher, they do it. And even, at 18%, that's kind of lower than I was expecting. I had just pulled ownership up as you were asking that, and I was expecting to see it at like 30% or something. So I think we're at least projecting people to have kind of figured out that the Raptors can still go a lot of different ways. So I think, at 18%, I'm willing to get there. One thing I will point out though, and this, it sort of has to do with Boucher. Svi Mikhailuk is projected for 1/3 the ownership. if Toronto goes small with their second unit and takes those backup center minutes away from Boucher, Mikhailuk's likely to be one of the biggest beneficiaries because he'd be getting a lot more minutes. He is not that much more expensive. So I do think that in lineups where you need a lower owned guy, Mikhailuk certainly has a path to success here as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that from him before as well. His last start, let's see, he worked his way in the starting lineup. Off the top of my head, I remember he had one really big game. Yeah, so we've seen 2 starts this year for Svi, and who knows where they're going to go with their starting lineup in this game. But in the 2 starts that Svi's had, he played 35 minutes in each of them. One of them he scored 22 DraftKings points. The other one he played 33.75. He scored 33.75 DraftKings points. And even the last 3 games, 19 minutes, 21 minutes, 19 minutes. So he's still getting some sort of minutes. And maybe we see without Pascal Siakam, the Raptors decide, hey, we're going up against Philadelphia 76ers. They don't have Joel Embiid. Maybe they decide to play a little bit smaller, and that could mean more minutes that, for Svi. Now, do you have any strong takes about the other guys on Toronto? Because I look at Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes. All of them benefit without Pascal Siakam being in the lineup. But at the same time, I feel like they've kind of already been appropriately priced for his absence. So these are guys that are certainly going to be in my player pool. It's a 3-game slate, but none of them are real priority plays for me. Do you see it any differently?
That's pretty much where I'm at as well. I think Siakam being back out does benefit them. Like, I think that Scotty Barnes is likely to play 36 plus minutes. I think OG gets up to around 38. VanVleet's already averaging 38 and a half minutes. I think it's likely you see something like 40 tonight, but the salaries are more or less in line with the production that we can expect because Siakam's only played 2 games this season and pricing hasn't really adjusted for that. So those guys are all fine. I think, it's like you said, it's a 3-game slate. They're good options, but the combination of their salaries being about where they should be, and someone just mentioned it in chat, if you're a 150 max player, there's only so much you can really do to account for this. But if you're someone that plays 1, 2, 3 lineups, whatever, and you kind of are paying more attention to each individual lineup, if you're on the fence between someone in this game and someone not in this game, go to the guy not in this game because you're going to just have more flexibility later on when we get news in Miami.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And anybody else from the Raptors, any kind of ancillary secondary plays do you think we should be talking about here?
I think 5K Gary Trent looks good. He's not the best fantasy producer, but I think it's likely you get 36 plus minutes from him. Not sure exactly how useful he ends up being. In part, that does depend on what news we get from Philadelphia, what news we get from Miami. But at 5K, just kind of a decent last guy in type piece.
All right, now let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers side of the game. And we know about Joel Embiid being out. That's going to make Andre Drummond the starting center again. And he's priced more appropriately now, where it's not this case where we don't have a 5,700 or 4,400 Andre Drummond. There's somewhat of a consideration for the actual price point here because we now have Andre Drummond priced at $8,600 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Andre Drummond is priced at $9,100. Now, to me, I still don't think the price tag is quite high enough considering the role that we've seen from recently. Even with Tobias Harris back in the mix, I think we're going to see Andre Drummond play a pretty substantial role here. But for you, Adam, do you think the salary is too high? Are you still looking to get to Andre Drummond at a good clip?
Definitely still looking to get to Drummond. It's just like you're seeing the sites gradually price him up, but they really need to just completely skip the baby steps. Just move him up to 9,500 or whatever. Every time he gets this $1,000 bump, it makes him a little bit riskier. It means that there's going to be more guys priced around him that have a similar ceiling. It's going to make it so if he gets in foul trouble or something, he can fail. When he was 5,700, it really didn't matter as long as he didn't get hurt. He was going to pay off that salary. Now, there's still ways for him to fail, but he still averaged 1.37 DraftKings points per minute overall this season. He's at 1.5 per minute in the games he has started. And most importantly, from those games, he's averaging 35 minutes per game. So I still expect him to play big minutes here. This is not a matchup I'm particularly concerned about for him either. I just think he still looks really, really good.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. And I think the only thing that I'll say about Andre Drummond's ad is I haven't projected for more fantasy points than any other center on the slate. Is that the same for you? Do you have him projected higher than Rudy Gobert?
Actually, yeah, I do.
Okay, so yeah, we're on the same page there with Andre Drummond versus the other centers on the slate. I haven't projected for the most fantasy points of everybody. I think that he is certainly the guy that we want to play in cash games at center on FanDuel. And I thought there was a little bit of consideration also to say hey, Bam Adebayo versus Andre Drummond. Is there a situation where maybe you're looking at Drummond instead of Adebayo? To me, I thought the answer was going to be both on DraftKings. Now, obviously, that gets really murky with Bam Adebayo being listed as questionable. So even more so solidifies Andre Drummond as the top center for cash games today. Now, the Tobias Harris situation, what do you make of him? Because the obvious thing, if we just look at this game on paper, Joel Embiid's out. There is no Ben Simmons. In this situation in the past, Tobias Harris has gotten all of the usage he could handle. But he's coming off COVID, and from what we know, he was significantly sick. I don't know what that means for his minutes. And I don't know the Sixers know what that means either. I was just talking about it with Eitan before when we were doing the 30-minute Yahoo show, is that even if Doc Rivers says something to the media, Doc Rivers is not to be trusted. He's a liar. Everything he ever tells us to the media ends up being incorrect. But with that said, I don't know that he knows what they're going to get from Tobias Harris today. Maybe Tobias Harris goes out on the court and he feels fine. Maybe Tobias Harris goes out on the court and he says, hey, I'm still not feeling great. My conditioning isn't great. And maybe they just limit his minutes a little bit for that reason. Do you have any real good sense for how many minutes we're getting out of Tobias Harris?
Nope. Alex has him projected for 33. I think that's reasonable. I think really like anywhere in that 30 to 33 minute range, if we don't get any sort of a number from Sixers beat reporters, I think is reasonable. And the way I kind of think about it is if we knew for a fact that Tobias Harris was a full go with Embiid out, I would assume he's playing like 38 minutes. So even though like a 32 or 33 minute projection is pretty healthy, considering what the Sixers have been doing with their rotation and what I would expect Harris to play if he were healthy, I think that kind of accounts for the fact that we don't know what his conditioning is going to look like here. And then the other thing that I think is really important to keep in mind in situations like this is the projected ownership. Right now we have him at 12%. So there's legitimate slate winning upside in Tobias Harris. If he is perfectly fine and he goes out and somehow plays 37, 38 minutes, he can just absolutely win the slate for you here without Embiid. If he were healthy, I think that ownership projection would be quite a bit higher. So I think that in larger field tournaments, there's some merit to taking the risk. It's a situation where I think that more often than not, it's going to disappoint, but it's a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. And right now we're projecting the field to pretty heavily be leaning one direction when I think it's more so, kind of just how does he feel while he's out there? And nobody really knows the answer right now.
Yeah, I think that is certainly the way that I'm on it too. And I tend to think that I'm just going to align myself with the field's ownership because I don't know. I don't know how we look at this with any kind of certainty. The upside is obvious. The downside is obvious, though, too. There's a lot of usage available. He's grossly underpriced at $7,400 on FanDuel, but I think the odds of him going out and either being rusty or conditioning being off, it's a substantial risk. So $7,400, 35% projected ownership on FanDuel. Just align me with the field on him. I'll have my slate made or broken elsewhere on situations that have a little bit, I was going to say less variance, but whatever. This entire 3-game slate has a ton of variance to it. But I have especially a lack of feel for the Tobias Harris situation. So I'm just going to be aligning myself on the field with him. Looking at some of the other guys on the Philadelphia 76ers, we've got Seth Curry listed as questionable. And let's look at this in a couple different ways. First, if Seth Curry is in, what does that do for guys like Shake Milton and Tyrese Maxey, in your opinion?
So, assuming that Harris is in, if Curry's in as well, it starts to make it so, I think guys like Maxey are still key pieces of the rotation, but I wouldn't be projecting Maxey for 40 minutes or anything. Same goes for Korkmaz, played 45 minutes last game. Assuming Harris is back and then, maybe Curry's back, I think you get back to like the 30 to 32 minutes from Korkmaz, Niang playing mid to upper 20s off the bench. Shake Milton, I think, is probably the most affected because we've seen when he comes off the bench that Rivers really hasn't been giving him as many minutes as we typically hope. He's kind of been getting like those mid 20s minutes when I thought there was a chance that you would see him in closing lineup still. But if Curry's out, I would expect that you see a lot more minutes from Milton. So I think he's the biggest. He's probably impacted the most by Curry's status. Guys like Maxey and Korkmaz, I think it's more so they lose, a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that certainly makes sense. But now in the situation where Seth Curry's out, we've got Tobias Harris back in the mix. There's been a ridiculous amount of playing time going to Tyrese Maxey, going to Shake Milton as of late. Tyrese Maxey's last handful of games, the minutes don't even make sense. Like I've projected his minutes wrong basically every single slate because what am I going to do? Give this guy 45 minutes per game? His recent games, 37 minutes, 45, 44, 39, 39. realistically, how much is he going to play today if Seth Curry's back in the lineup?
Maxey, I think, still plays a ton because he was playing a lot with Curry in the lineup before. And I think, like, when you look at their last game, Paul Reed played 23 and a half minutes, right? So Harris coming back, I think first and foremost just takes those minutes away. Paul Reed probably doesn't play. If he does, it's, maybe some minutes as the backup. Like maybe he takes the 5 minutes that Charles Bassey played. That's what we had seen 2 games ago where Reed wasn't even really used as the backup center. So I think that most of those minutes are going to Harris. Then you cut some of Furkan Korkmaz's 45 minutes, maybe cutting him back to, let's say, 32. If most or all of those go to Harris, that's basically the minutes that Harris is likely to play. So I don't think Maxey's really affected by Harris in terms of minutes. I think he's affected in terms of usage rate. But I think Maxey plays huge minutes here, with or without Curry. If Curry is out, I think it's Milton that sees I think it's Milton's minutes probably that fluctuate with Curry. I think Maxey gets his one way or the other.
Yeah, and then if Seth Curry is final question I'm going to ask you about the 76ers here. If Seth Curry is out, what do you expect is going to be the starting 5 for the Philadelphia 76ers? Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, Andre Drummond. I think we could feel very confident those are going to be 3 of the starters. Who do you think the other 2 are if there is no Seth Curry tonight?
So who are the 3 you said? Maxey, Harris,
Maxey, Harris, and Drummond.
Green and yeah. So actually, I forgot that Green came off the bench last game. It was messing me up when I was looking at the rotation.
Yeah.
I think Milton comes off the bench either way. I think if Curry is out, he gets more run, but I would guess that they start Maxey, Green, Korkmaz, Harris, Drummond.
Okay.
I'm not super confident in that though.
Yeah, it is really weird that here's the reason I think Danny Green came off the bench last game. It was the tail end of a back-to-back. He's a million years old, and they were like, let's try to preserve the health of a guy who just recently missed time from a hamstring injury too. So hamstring injury for Danny Green, he misses about a week of time, comes back, starts, plays 30 minutes. Then they have a game again the next day, and that's why I think they limited his minutes. It was like, are we really going to play this guy big minutes on the tail end of back-to-back after he played? So I do think that Danny Green gets back into the starting lineup. It does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the situation. Furkan Korkmaz, nobody's going to... I just want to talk about this game that Korkmaz had the other day. Maybe the most unlikely bust that I can remember, given the results afterwards. It would seem weird to say that I can't believe Furkan Korkmaz busted, but when somebody's cheap and plays like 45 minutes and takes 18 shots, the chance of them failing is almost 0%, and it happened.
Yeah, I had like 75% Korkmaz on that slate, and I kind of was like, that might have been a little unnecessary, like to have that much Korkmaz. And I saw he played 45 minutes, and I was just like, well, if I'd known he was going to do that, I would have had 100. So I can't believe that he failed as badly as he did. It was kind of funny too, because I had said prior to that game, I pointed out that Korkmaz's assist numbers are up, and somebody in chat, or his assist opportunities are up, and somebody in chat was like, he had 1 assist and 2 assists the last 2 games. He's still not getting assists. And then he actually, I think, had as many assists as he did points. But the problem was that he had like 5 points.
Yeah. And I'm looking now. So I was seeing a report that there are limited minutes for Tobias Harris. Let me look through the tweet and that we got from News God and see if there's anything specific that's in there, or just limited minutes. Just Sixers to power forward Tobias Harris is expected to play tonight, according to a league source. I don't know. I don't even know what to make of the limited minutes. I still think if Tobias Harris goes out and is playing well and feels good, they're going to keep running him out. It's still the same amount of variance to me. Unless we get a really hard minutes cap, it's not going to change anything too drastically for me. I don't expect him to play 40 minutes anyway. I think there's going to be some sort of minutes restriction there, but just a general report of limited minutes for Tobias Harris. Does that change your opinion of him at all?
Yeah. I mean, if he's going to be on a minutes limit, like we don't get a hard actual number, it's kind of still what I assumed. Like he's probably playing like 30 to 32, somewhere in there. If he feels really good, maybe he plays more, but it's still kind of just really uncertain to me. Yeah,
it's same thing. I'm just going to be aligning myself with the fields with him, and then whatever ends up happening is whatever happens with his production. My slate will be made or broken elsewhere. So we can move on to the next game now, but first, guys, don't forget that if you are new to Awesemo, you can go sign up for an Awesemo Plus membership for $29.95 for a weekly pass, and that'll get you access to all the tools we have over on the site. By the way, the NBA player projections, those are free today, so you can go check that out and see some of the stuff that we normally have behind the paywall. We also have projections content for all the DFS sports that are out there. Get access to all that for $29.95 for weekly pass. But if you're new to Awesemo, use the promo code NBA Deeper Dive, all one word, all capital letters. That'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. And if you're only looking to play NBA, we have a weekly package available for as low as $4.95. All right, the promo code does the same thing. You know, what do we? I'm just copying and pasting what's in the DMP. Are you changing the promo code on the fly? Is this an executive decision from Jordan? All right. The promo code, according to Jordan, it's not NBA Deeper Dive. It's now NBA Live. So I'm being held to the fire. Promo code NBA Live. I'm going to assume it's still all one word, all capital letters, or else I'm going to get in trouble, apparently. So, all right. Use the promo code NBA Live if you're going to sign up right now. Also, in terms of free content, guys, we've got, like I said, the NBA player projections are up on the site. Also, Adam, who's right here beside me, he writes one of the best, most comprehensive free articles that we have in all of the DFS industry. He spends a lot of time on that. So go check that out as well. And that is a really good breakdown of just everything that's going on in the slate and some of the players that Adam is honing in on. So that is NBA's deep dive article. And that is a free article that is up on awesemo.com every day. All right, let's move on. I like how Jordan yells at me and then just gets up and leaves. Like, hey, Greg, you're not doing your job. You're not doing your job correctly. I'm going to go leave the room. And who even knows where Jordan went now? But producer Jordan has left the building. All right, next game on the slate here, Indiana Pacers against the Utah Jazz. And let's start on the Indiana side of the game because we have Karis LeVert officially ruled out. I still don't have a ton of guys that I love getting to here, though. Adam, if I'm paying up for somebody, I prefer getting to Paul George than Domantas Sabonis. Malcolm Brogdon to me is okay to get to, but I'm still a little scared off by the matchup. Is there anybody from the Pacers that you really do like on this slate?
I think no. Brogdon's salary jumped about $1,000 from last night, and it's a back-to-back in Utah. Clearly not a particularly good spot. He has been good this year. You've seen the assist numbers come up a bit. Usage rate has been there, and LeVert being out, certainly is a benefit. But the matchup's still pretty scary. The price tag is tough to get to, and it's just, even with LeVert out, these guys are mostly priced for LeVert to be out anyway, because he hasn't played much this season. Whereas you talk about these other teams, you have Toronto playing without Siakam. They're pretty much priced appropriately, but you have Philadelphia playing without Embiid. So those guys are still in some spots underpriced. Miami without Butler, at the very least, you're going to have guys like Hero and Lowry and Bam underpriced. But if those guys are out too, you're just going to have like an entire free team. It just makes it tough to really prioritize Sabonis, who has struggled this year from a fantasy standpoint, or Brogdon, who's been really good, but is also priced up.
Yeah. And that's really how I'm looking at it is Sabonis. I just don't like the matchup. I don't like his price point. His production also overall this year hasn't been quite what it was last year, taking a little bit of a step back. So we've seen Sabonis now. He's gone over 50 fantasy points just twice since the second game of the season. And that's not really enough considering what his salary is. If I have the ability to spend up, if there's a lot of value that opens up in the slate for Miami, I'm much more apt to pay up for Paul George than I am to Sabonis. Is there anybody's contrarian play like Duarte or Justin Holiday that you think is really worth looking at with LeVert out of the picture?
Mixing in a little bit of those guys is fine, but there's nothing that really stands out. 5,200 for Duarte is fine. LeVert being out again, it gives him a little bit of a usage bump, but that's still, he's still pretty similar to what he's been all season long, because he's still not going to get shots ahead of Sabonis. He's still not going to get shots ahead of Brogdon. Miles Turner is always a high upside play, but there's so many good centers even on this slate that it's difficult to prioritize anything there. Honestly, I think maybe the most appealing piece is like $3,100 Torrey Craig, and just hoping that, you get him at low ownership and he has one of those random games, but that's not any sort of ringing endorsement. It's just kind of like, it's a 3-game slate with limited value. At least Torrey Craig is free.
All right. By the way, I'm going to circle back on something because I just got a DM from Lofty. NBA Live is not the promo code. The correct promo code, NBA Deeper Dive. All one word, all capital letters. Producer Jordan, you are wrong. Take your loss. Lofty has told me NBA Live, that is for live before lock. NBA Deeper Dive still remains for this show. Jordan, you could speak on the God mic and say something in my head again, but I've been told that you are incorrect, sir. Go ahead. What's your response? No, he's not even. You're not even going to say something to my ear only for me. All right. By the way, here's another tweet that was just sent to me from the news god. Sixers forward Tobias Harris feels good, according to Doc Rivers. The team will determine his availability after his pregame routine. Whatever. He's going to play tonight, and minutes still a little bit uncertain. But all right, that still, I think same situation with Tobias Harris. I think there's a little bit of uncertainty with the minutes. I expect him to play, and then how much he plays probably depend how good he feels. Let's move over to the Utah side of the game, and one of the only teams that is not dealing with an injury situation today, the Utah Jazz, mostly in check today. Donovan Mitchell, I think that he is a sensible pay-up option. The guy I'm actually getting to the most from this game right now is Mike Conley, and Conley is somebody who I think in the mid-range is going a little bit overlooked by the field. And, you know, he's had a pretty solid fantasy season. We've seen Mike Conley last game he only played 29 minutes. It was also a game that wasn't super competitive against the Atlanta Hawks. They didn't need to push him, but games before that against the Heat, 37 fantasy points against the Hawks. The game before that, 39 against the Kings, 39.75. I think there's a little more upside in Mike Conley that meets the eye. Is he somebody that you like getting to on this slate?
I think he's fine. He's not really a priority for me here. His assist percentage has been down this year. Usage rate's at 20.9%. In the games he's played with Mitchell, you're probably getting around 30 minutes from him. For me, I like Mitchell and Gobert the most from this team. I think Mitchell is still a little bit underpriced here. He's got a 34.7% usage rate in the games he's played with Conley. The assist numbers are up this year at 28.7%. In competitive games, you're probably getting around 34 minutes from him. Indiana's not a fast-paced team, but they have struggled defensively this year. So that sets up well for Mitchell also. And his salary is still, I think, pretty affordable. Gobert, still priced up on FanDuel, but he's dropped $900 on DraftKings. So, you know, still contending with guys like Drummond and Bam, but 8K for Gobert with the rate that he's rebounding at this year against a big Indiana front court, you know, not that you expect Gobert to lose minutes anyway, but certainly doesn't hurt there. He had some foul trouble last game, so don't read into those minutes. But if this game's competitive, you're likely to get 32, 33 minutes from him, averaging well over a fantasy point per minute this year. So those two really stand out. And then I think it's Conley, Bogdanovich, Clarkson as, you know, secondary guys that have decent ceilings, but don't really look quite as good to me.
Yeah, Gobert's really benefited from the change in rules that the NBA has implemented, just because with the lack of guys going to the line quite as often, there's just a lot more missed shots. And the result is Rudy Gobert pulling down all of the rebounds. He has more games this year with over 15 rebounds than games with under 15 rebounds. We've seen him also with a handful of 20 rebound games. So he's averaging 16 rebounds per game this year. He's seen a nice little uptick in fantasy production, and something that I didn't really consider could potentially happen before the season started. But the change in rules really benefiting some of the rebound rates for big men. But how does Rudy Gobert stack up to you compared to somebody like an Andre Drummond? If you're playing, let's say, 100 lineups and you could only play Drummond or Gobert, how would you allocate your exposure between the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And a lot of it's going to have to do with ownership projections, because this is, and I was going to say it earlier when we talked about Drummond, I think Drummond is still a clear top play. I'm not concerned about the salary. I think this is kind of the first slate where there's at least like some ownership considerations here, though, because of Bam/Dedmon, whoever's starting, and because of Gobert's DraftKings price tag. So this is more DraftKings specific. But even on FanDuel, since you can only roster one, it's kind of the first time where I care at all what Drummond's projected ownership is. Right now, we have him projected for less ownership than Bam. We have him projected on DraftKings for like 14 points more than Gobert. So I do think that it's not. It's always tough to talk about this. Like, I don't think it's a must. Like, you don't have to look at this and say, oh, I have to play more Gobert than Drummond because he's lower owned. I think one viable strategy in situations like this would be to sort of get 40% Gobert, 25% Drummond, if the field's playing 40% Drummond, 25% Gobert, kind of like you and I were talking about on Twitter last night with Cade Cunningham and Ricky Rubio. I think Drummond is a great play. I think Gobert is a good play. Ownership aside, I would rather play Drummond out of the two, but I think that, in a one-game sample, the range of outcomes is very, very similar, and I don't mind just sort of flipping it and saying, okay, if the field doesn't want to go to Gobert and I think they project similarly, then I'll take Gobert. And, the nights that he beats Drummond, which is going to happen, I don't know, let's say 40% of the time, I'm going to have a good night. So it's a close enough spot. Like, I'm not looking at this saying I think Drummond is necessarily over-owned or I certainly not saying I think he's a bad play, but I do think this is one spot where if ownership projections hold where they are, you probably make money over the long run by just playing whoever's the lowest owned out of that group.
All right. And we have a super chat here from Kendall Young. And not a question here, just a shout out for us. He's saying that he's new to Awesemo. He only plays 6 to 10 lineups, but he uses Fantasy Cruncher in our content. He won $325 from $15 an entry this week so far. So he is a believer now. So Kendall, thank you for the super chat. And thank you also for reading our content and checking out the site. And we've got a little giveaway here. So if you guys want to check out Awesemo, you have potential right now to win an Awesemo Plus monthly membership for free. So I'm going to set this up here. We're going to do something called an Odd Shopper Scavenger Hunt. If you guys are not familiar with Odd Shopper, this is a new tool that we have well, not new, but something that we've been improving and working on over at Awesemo.com. And we're really trying to make everybody aware of what it is and what it does. So it's something that we could really hopefully implement this to help make you guys some money. So go over to oddshopper.com, or if you go to Awesemo, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's something that says Odd Shopper on it. Click on that. That'll bring you to the Odd Shopper page. And what we're going to do here is a scavenger hunt. So I'm going to give you a prompt. You guys look it up, and whoever gets the answer first, you will get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And what you'll do is message the support email over at awesemo.com, and they will hook you up with the free membership. So here is going to be the first one. Look up whatever the bet that we currently have on the site that is projected for the best expected ROI. Which player prop has the best expected ROI? Go look that up at Odd Shopper. If you look at the site and you navigate it, you could see how you could sort on the right-hand side of the screen, how you could sort the bets by expected ROI, largest to smallest. Whichever bet currently has the best expected ROI, the first person to put that in wins. And, oh, okay, well, we got that pretty quick. And the winner, Evan Gosset, he went with Precious. So he wins the free month of Awesemo Plus. So Evan, go reach out to our email, Awesemo support, and they'll hook you up with the free month. If you have any issues with that, message me on Twitter, and I'll get you in touch with the right people. All right, the second one that we have over here for Odd Shopper: which Miami Heat player has the best expected ROI on the over for their points prop? So which Miami Heat player has the best expected ROI on the over for their points prop? Let's see. Who has got it? Oh, it looks like the first one answer was King Hodge with Bam. And that is the correct answer. So currently Bam Adebayo has the best expected ROI for the over on his points prop. Now, Bam Adebayo today, and Adam and I are going to talk about the Miami Heat situation in a minute. Obviously, there's a lot subject to change here in terms of will Bam be in, will Bam be out? But here are the numbers for Bam Adebayo this year in a limited sample with Jimmy Butler off the court. 32.2% usage rate, and he's scoring 56 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So before I ask the next question, Adam, get people a chance to reset. And we're going to talk more about the Heat in a second, but how much are you reading into just some of the Heat sample size this year with Jimmy Butler off the court, when considering that it's not a massive amount of minutes to go off of?
I'm not reading too much into it. I mean, like directionally, I think it's correct. Like Bam does really, really well. I don't think Bam continues to average 1.6 DraftKings points per minute without Butler, but even going back to last year, he's at 1.32 DraftKings points per minute without Butler on the floor. I think that, I would expect Lowry to get a nice bump. He's at 1.01 DraftKings points per minute without Butler. Kind of surprised he still only has a 16.9% usage rate. Over a larger sample, I would expect that to come up, but we are still talking about 274 possessions. So that's kind of surprising. I guess it's just a matter of Tyler Hero still dominating usage, and Bam over that stretch has a 33% usage rate. So if you assume that Bam, who for the season is at about 27% usage, even if, let's say, he picks up a few points, I think it's unlikely he maintains 33%. Like, that's a lot. I think you probably see Lowry get to like the 20% or so that he had in Toronto when Butler's out.
Yeah. And the one thing also that just kind of makes it hard that I didn't really know, do I look at the numbers last year, look at the numbers this year? Because Kyle Lowry on the court brings a totally different dynamic, not only in terms of it's another player to use some of the shots, which by the way has not been that much when Jimmy Butler's off the court, only a 16.2% usage rate for Kyle Lowry. But Kyle Lowry just has the ball in his hands more. He's doing more facilitating on offense. And you just don't know who he's going to be looking to as his go-to guy. And maybe he just has a good rapport with Bam Adebayo. And that could be the reason that we see Bam Adebayo with such a high usage rate with Jimmy Butler off the court this year. All right, here is the final giveaway that we're doing over at Odd Shopper for our Awesemo Plus monthly giveaway. By the way, guys, once again, go check out Odd Shopper every day, especially if you're getting into sports betting, you're checking out the player props. It is a really good way to find value on player prop bets. And those are some of the ones that we're highlighting right here as well. But I could not close out the first Odd Shopper segment we're doing here without bringing up my guy, Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe, I do like a little bit as a contrarian GPP option today. Which Eric Bledsoe prop, and tell me whether it's over or under, has the highest expected win rate today? So if you were betting an Eric Bledsoe prop, which one over at Odd Shopper do we have projected with the best odds of winning? All right. What do we got? It assists, no. Points over from Shlomo Kabani. That is the winner. We've got points over, and by the way, the answers come in really quick when we give those out. And are you looking at the chat right now?
Off and on.
Okay, so the chat, as soon as we give these out, just people answer really quickly. Now, I think some people might kind of be trying to cheat the system. They're just guessing right away, not actually looking up the answer. But we did get the answer right there from our Shlomo. He was the first to hit. And that was the over for Eric Bledsoe in points. So once again, guys, Odd Shopper, really good tool to use for sports betting. If you're in a state that makes it that has legal sports betting, one thing that's cool about Odd Shopper is you go over, it takes all of the bets that are available at the sports books that are legal in your state, and it'll tell you what are the best lines that you could bet at those available sports books. So go check it out. Something I've been using. It's really helpful. All right, we just got news also while we're doing that segment. Precious Achiuwa will be starting in place of Pascal Siakam. Siakam out today. Kind of what I was expecting, but does that change any of the things that we said earlier about the Raptors?
No, for sure what I was expecting. The biggest question mark is still going to be, what does the second unit rotation look like? Is it Chris Boucher soaking up most of the backup center minutes, or is it them playing small, going with, Barnes or somebody else, and giving more minutes to Svi? That's the biggest question to me. And so that's why I still think Boucher is fine as a value, but I do like getting to some Svi, Mikhailuk at the low ownership. I would set a rule, even though they're different positions. I like setting a rule not to have more than one of Mikhailuk and Boucher, just because I think it's unlikely they both play a lot of minutes. But nothing really changes there. It's still just kind of up in the air. What's the second unit going to look like?
Yeah. And once again, I think that we have to kind of consider the rotation just be the same as what it was all at the start of the season. We've only seen Pascal Siakam play 2 games this year. And this isn't that much different of a situation. It's
Birch,
whatever, what's that?
Birch being out is the thing, is the piece that makes it tough, though.
Yeah, that's true also. But in general, I'm looking at a lot of this minute. Like, Precious is still the go-to value play for me here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then in terms of how many minutes are you going to project Boucher for?
I have him at like 16. I think Alex has him at like 15. I know he has him at 16. I know I looked earlier and we were on the same page. I don't even feel confident in that. Like, I think that's my best guess at what they do, is that Boucher plays like 16 minutes, doesn't get all the backup center minutes, but let's say Achiuwa plays 28, Boucher plays 16, and then they go small for the other 4. Like, that's reasonable to me. It wouldn't be shocking if, we do the show tomorrow and we look back and it's like, oh, Boucher played 6 minutes and Svi played 32 off the bench and Banton played 24. Like, that can happen, but my guess is that Boucher gets at least into the mid-teens, but it's kind of just a guess.
Yeah. So I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. Once again, I don't have a great feel for the situation. Ultimately, I think there's a pretty good chance that we just see Nick Nurse spread out the minutes. And like you said before, this guy, so 2 coaches, the things we know about. Doc Rivers, dirty, filthy liar, does not tell truths to the media. He does nothing but lie to them. And Nick Nurse does not like Chris Boucher. He does whatever he can to not give minutes to Chris Boucher. So I think it's a tricky situation for sure. I'm going to have some Chris Boucher in my player pool, but my preferred option there is going to be Precious Achiuwa for sure. Now let's get to the most hazy situation on the entire slate. That is the Los Angeles Clippers at home against the Miami Heat. And let's start on the Heat side of the game, because we know Jimmy Butler's out, but we just recently got news a little bit before the show started. Bam Adebayo questionable, Tyler Hero questionable. We talked a little bit about how we're going to be handling this situation before we really got into the breakdown of the game by games. But let's do individually. If Tyler Hero is out, which player on the Heat do you think stands to benefit the most?
Probably Lowry, number one. And, not from a minute standpoint, because he can't really play more minutes than he already is. But I think, we were just talking about the usage for Lowry being down, even without Butler on the floor. Tyler Hero's got a 27% usage rate without Butler on the floor. Overall this season, he's at around 27.5% as well. So there would be a lot of shots to go around if Hero is out, knowing that Butler is already out as well. So I think Lowry would benefit. And then in terms of the playing time, I think you see more minutes for Gabe Vincent. We know Max Strus, I think Strus is out, right? Or is he questionable?
Strus is questionable.
Okay. I know he was out yesterday. So if we assume that Strus is out as well, I think you see pretty solid minutes for Vincent if Hero is out. Duncan Robinson would play, I think, more minutes. The issue with Duncan Robinson is it's tough to allocate a lot more usage to him because he's not going to create for himself. He's still going to catch and shoot threes, and there's only so many times that can happen. So he'll get a few more field goal attempts, but I think that Robinson starts to look better at 3,800 if Hero's out because of the minutes. Lowry starts to look better because of increased usage. Vincent and or Strus, depending on Strus's status, start to look better just because they need bodies.
Yeah, and I mean, Max Strus, it's funny because early in the day when I was going over the injury report for this slate, when I was doing the strategy show, I was like, hey, we got a lot of injuries, but one guy who's not going to be relevant is Max Strus. Lo and behold, a few hours later, Max Strus all of a sudden does potentially become relevant if we have, Tyler Hero ruled out. We could find Max Strus playing a prominent role in the rotation. Now, Bam Adebayo, we've seen him out this year, and in the game that he was out, Dwayne Dedmon ended up drawing the start. Dedmon, he's a quality enough role player. He's a good points per minute fantasy producer. This year, he's playing 13.9 minutes per game, averaging over a fantasy point per minute in the time that he's been on the court. And in the one start he had this year, he only played 17 minutes, but that was due to foul trouble. He picked up like 2 fouls in 2 minutes or something like that, if I remember correctly. He ended up playing 17 minutes, scored 23 DraftKings points, and realistically, he probably would have played 26 plus minutes in that game had he been able to avoid foul trouble. So I think that Dwayne Dedmon, should he end up getting into the starting lineup here, would be the best value play on the slate. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, without a doubt. And also one other difference, not that this makes a huge deal, but his backup is also out. Markieff Morris is out tonight. So you have, obviously, if he gets in massive foul trouble again, they'll find someone else. They'll use PJ Tucker or whatever. But there's, with Morris being out, like if Bam's out, Dedmon's minutes are even safer because Morris, some percentage of the time, is going to play well and just take minutes away from Dedmon. Whoever is backing him up here, I don't know if it would be PJ Tucker. I don't know if they go to Yurt 7 or Apollo. Like I don't know what they would do behind them. But the point being, there's just less risk to his minutes outside of foul trouble.
Yeah, and that's certainly something I'm looking at. The other thing too with Dedmon is, look at last game. He got in foul trouble. He scores 23 fantasy points in 17 minutes despite the foul trouble. He's a good enough fantasy producer that he might get there even in only 18 minutes like we saw last game. So not something that really becomes a massive concern for me just because he is so cheap. Foul trouble, there's always a risk there. But another thing to consider too with late swap, I don't know that Dedmon is going to necessarily pick up a ton of ownership if this news doesn't come out until late in the day. If we find out that Bam Adebayo is out at, like 8:55, 8:30 or something after the Toronto Philly game locks, I mean, we could ultimately find that Dwayne Dedmon starts and only ends up with like 15% ownership just because people don't have the flexibility to late swap. Yeah,
and I was actually going to say too, we kind of talked about the strategy that I plan on using tonight where on late swap sites, I'm going to go ahead and assume that like Bam and Hero play because I think that's still, I'm going to get to those guys a lot. So I'll have that flexibility to swap to Dedmon and Lowry and these other guys. But someone in chat mentioned the site that they play on that doesn't have late swap. That used to be the case with like FanDuel, and you kind of had to, it played kind of some more strategy into it. If you're playing on a site that doesn't have late swap, I think there's a decent edge to be had to make sure you get, just project, at least run some sets of lineups that like project these guys to be out. Because what happens on non-late swap sites is people kind of take the middle. They're not going to play Bam Adebayo because they're afraid he's going to sit, or they're not going to play him as much as they would if he wasn't questionable. But they're also not going to play Dwayne Dedmon because they're afraid Adebayo is going to play. So what ends up happening is Bam Adebayo is lower owned than he would be if he plays, and Dedmon is lower owned than he should be if Bam sits. So you're gonna end up, and this obviously is assuming that you're playing more than one lineup, but you're gonna end up, having some dead lineups depending on how that goes. But you're also gonna put yourself in a really, really good position because neither guy is gonna have the ownership that they otherwise would deserve.
All right. As for the situation where both Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero play, I think they're pretty obvious plays in that kind of situation. Tyler Hero, big minutes, added usage without Jimmy Butler on the court. And then also we were just talking about the over props that stood out if Bam Adebayo ends up playing that we saw over on OddsShopper. The numbers for Bam Adebayo, just to repeat what I said before, 32.2% usage rate when Jimmy Butler's off the court this year, scoring 56.33 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. It just makes all the sense in the world for me to get to Bam Adebayo, particularly on DraftKings. That 7,400 price tag is ridiculous. So we just need to find out, obviously, if he's in or not. But would you agree Bam Adebayo, one of the, if not the best play on the slate if he ends up playing?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't even think we need.
He's just been great. I mean, even with Butler in this year, he's been so good. 27% usage rate. He's rebounding at a really high level. The only downside is that he has lost some assists in exchange for that increased usage rate, but he's been really good anyway. And then you take Butler out and there's just more opportunities for him. And then he's underpriced. So, obviously there is still stiff competition at center with Gobert and with Drummond. And then you have, the Achua value piece as well. But I think Bam being $1,200 less than Drummond on DraftKings, being $600 less than Gobert, and Butler being out still makes him look like the top guy to me.
All right. Anything else that you want to bring up from the Miami Heat side of the game? I think Kyle Lowry also, it makes a lot of sense, really, regardless of the situation. With Jimmy Butler out, Lowry makes sense. And then if we find out that Tyler Hero and or Bam Adebayo are out, Lowry also then becomes a really important play on this slate. But anybody else from the Heat here that you really think we should be discussing?
Yeah, the one guy I kind of forgot to mention was Caleb Martin. He kind of surprisingly only played 14 and a half minutes last night, even with Butler getting hurt. In the second half, he played a total of like 6 minutes and 22 seconds. That's weird to me, but like if you take Hero out, that's a lot of minutes. If you take Bam out, I assume Miami is just going to be playing small for a while. And so if any of these guys sit, there's the potential for Martin to get quite a bit more run. And even if they play, there's still a chance that Martin plays more than he did last night. But last night's rotation doesn't give me any sort of confidence there. But if one of Hero or Bam sit, it's just going to open up minutes. And I think Martin's kind of one of the next guys in line at 3K flat.
All right, now let's move over to the Clippers side of the game. And I think where we have to start is Paul George. And I don't have Paul George projected crazy well for his price tag. Over $10,000 on FanDuel, over $10,000 on DraftKings. I haven't projected below 50 fantasy points. But this is a slate where we could have a massive amount of value to get to. And I don't even know if points per dollar matters as much as raw points on a slate like this. Because let's say Bam Adebayo gets ruled out and Dwayne Dedmon is viable. Maybe Tyler Hero gets ruled out and we get somebody else who ends up starting for the Heat for cheap. And then just being able to get even 45 fantasy points for 10,300 out of Paul George. Well, that's bad on most slates. It's different in the context of this slate where there's potentially a lot of value and not a lot of players to pay up for. So do you have Paul George projected well from a points per dollar perspective, and does it matter?
From a points per dollar perspective, not really. It's still a tough matchup here. Butler being out should make life a little bit easier. If Bam is also out, I think life just keeps getting easier. But Miami's been a slow team this year. They've been good defensively, and George is expensive. But I don't have him as like a bad point per dollar play either. He's kind of just neutral at that salary. But to what you were saying, this is like the exact opposite of yesterday, where yesterday you had all those pay up options, and they were obviously fine. You're never going to tell someone they shouldn't play Steph Curry or Giannis or whatever. But because there were so many good mid-range options as well, there was a really good chance that you could find mid-range guys that happen to score like the same amount of points as those guys at the top. Today, it's a lot less likely because, you do have the strong mid-range with the centers. But outside of that, George is just, even if he's not the top scorer, he's going to be one of the top 3 or 4, barring something really, really weird happening tonight. So it makes it so the raw points, like you were saying, play a little bit bigger role than they would on a slate like last night, where it's very, very easy to find a lot of raw points.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm with Paul George. Is, at first glance, like I don't know, I want to roster this guy over 10,000 on the slate, and it's like, well, if I'm going to roster Dwayne Dedman, if I'm going to roster potentially Precious Achiuwa, where am I spending my money? And it just Paul George by default. He's the only option there. As for other guys on the Clippers, I want to bring up Eric Bledsoe. Number one, I'm a sucker for Eric Bledsoe. I've rostered him way too much over the last few years. But another thing with Eric Bledsoe, he has a fairly substantial role in the Clippers offense this year. Not that he's a high usage guy, but his minutes have been pretty solid lately. In the last 3 games, he played 31 and a half minutes last game against Portland, a game where he struggled a little bit against the Hornets. His minutes were down in that spot, although it was also a game where they won by 14 and the starters weren't necessarily needed as much. And then he against Minnesota before that, he played 29 minutes. So I think there's potential for Eric Bledsoe to play over 30 minutes at a pretty reasonable salary here. So, contrarian, I think, becomes viewed a little bit differently on a slate of this size, just because there are a lot of options to get to. But, Eric Bledsoe, who's projected for right around 20% ownership on DK, on FanDuel projected for 27% ownership. It's a number I don't mind getting overweight to the field on. Do you have any Eric Bledsoe takes?
I agree with you. He's just pretty fairly priced. I think there's a pretty good chance he plays around 28 minutes or so here. Certainly, if he's playing well, he could play more. There's just so many sort of interchangeable bodies on the Clippers that, if Mann's playing well, he'll close over Bledsoe potentially. You could see Kennard, you could see Batum. Like they all just play like every position pretty much. So the closing lineup is pretty fluid. But at the same time, if Bledsoe's playing well, not only is he scoring more fantasy points per minute than he's projected for, but he's likely to pick up a few extra minutes in tournaments. That's always something that's pretty appealing. So I think Bledsoe is fine. Like, he doesn't stand out to me as a priority. I feel similarly about him as I do $4,800 Terrence Mann, as I do about $5,300 Batum, as I do about $4,100 Kennard. They're all just sort of pieces that are mediocre plays, but that also are a little bit lower owned than a lot of the good plays, right?
Anything else? We're wrapping up here. Only got about 60 seconds left. Is there anybody else from the Clippers that really stands out to you? Because once again, I think kind of when we talked about, like the Jazz guys before, I think there are guys like Reggie Jackson, viable, but nobody's a real priority play for me. Anybody you look at on the Clippers be like, I need a roster this guy tonight.
That's where I'm at as well. The final piece I guess I would mention here, Zubats projects fine, but center is really loaded. Hartenstein is kind of the same thing. Like, he's 3,400, so he projects as a decent value, but he takes up a center spot, which sucks. The thing that I would kind of consider, and this is only because it's a 3-game slate, if Bam gets ruled out, give more minutes to Justice Winslow, because I think it could turn into a game where if Bam's out, Dedman starts at center, PJ Tucker backs him up, Justice Winslow plays the backup center instead of Hartenstein. Not that that's a lock to happen, but I just like finding spots like that on a 3-game slate where I potentially could get like 18 minutes of a guy that people are projecting to play 0 minutes if the rotation breaks my way. And I think it's relatively likely that happens, with Miami essentially being forced to go smaller.
All right, that is going to do it for us, guys, but don't go anywhere. We've got Live Before Lock coming up next. Also, do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channels to get those guys support before they come in. Don't want Lofty telling me that nobody liked the video before he got on. So do me a favor, give it a like.
is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock show. I haven't done one of these since I was with Josh Engelman for the NBA Finals, which feels like yesterday. But we got 3 games to talk about. Just turned over from Greg Ehrenberg and Adam Scher, breaking it all down game by game. We'll go position by position here. I'm Dave Lochran, but you knew that, at Lafayette_D on Twitter. And joining me for the first time, I don't know if Jordan went individual screen first and then he's flipping it over now, but your boy Matt Savoca at Draftaholic. This fella doesn't just do football, talks basketball as well. Making his debut, popping that metaphorical cherry here on the NBA Live Before Lock show for a 3-game Thursday slate. What's good, brother? Good to be back with you. It's only been a few hours.
Yeah. It's talking a second sport today with you. I feel like I just wandered into the wrong building or something. No, but I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to be a walking advertisement for the tools here. And, that's one of the best things here when we cover multiple sports at Awesemo is that we analysts don't physically have time to spend every single second on every single sport. We have to specialize to a certain extent. That's why these tools that consistently update right until lock help us so much. And I'm so excited to get into it. Thrilled for my first NBA show.
Yeah, so I lost it because chat's moving so fast. But Jordan says NBA marathon show. We don't have time for that. That was our matchups marathon show every Thursday, 11 Eastern for NFL. It's the only place to be. If you haven't been watching that, come hang with Matt and myself. But hey, we're happy to have you guys with us. Looking forward to a fun show. And yeah, Greg wasn't lying. Hit that thumbs up, man. These guys, can't get us to 500. Let's show them how it's done here and how it's done right. Let's pop this north of 500 when we get started. But yeah, happy to see all you guys in chat. Always a fun time. We got about 54 minutes till lock. We'll run through this, get through each position, give you a different spin on this one than they had on the deeper dive. And hopefully we'll all come full circle and be in good shape before we get to lock. But yeah, subscribe to the channel too if you haven't done that yet. Much appreciated. You getting us north of 65,000. You know how it works, guys. Combat the YouTube overlords. We can only do it with your help. We got to fight that pesky algorithm. And if you want to join, hit join down below. We had a lot of people join today, which was pretty awesome. Get the emojis, the badges, the shout outs, and already all these priority questions answered too in chat. So let's do it. Spencer just restocked his IV with coffee round 2. Let's go.
Yes.
So Matt, 3-game slate, just looking at this one out of the gate, it's tough because, and I'll be frank with you, I don't think Bam or Tyler Hero end up sitting. We've seen Bam, and I know it was weird. They were questionable, then they were off the injury report. Now they're like questionable again, but they're not on all they weren't on the injury report. It's weird. Bam has played through nagging injuries all the time. He's pretty frequently questionable. I expect them to play, but that is the latest game on the slate. It's a 10:30 Eastern time tip. So in the event, and I'm just throwing this out there, that this is a problem, right? And that they are ruled out and that you're trying to make contingency plans and you don't crunch lineups on Fantasy Cruncher where they automatically put your late game players in the, guard, forward, or utility spot if possible. Make sure if you're hand building lineups that your late players are in those spots so you have the range of options instead of just one position.
Yeah, you got to do that. And also, what are you doing? You got to get Fantasy Cruncher here. That's really what you got to do here. Yeah, in this situation, I don't really know. It's been super weird with this Tyler Hero situation. And talk about a player, if he is out, how we're going to have to change our point of view on this entire slate. If you look at the optimal lineup percentage on both DraftKings and FanDuel, I mean, it's just through the roof on Tyler Hero. So we've got some pretty serious decision making. I guess you could say Kyle Lowry would get a bump. And, I really suspect Bam is going to be in. But, boy, is there anybody we really want? Dwayne Dedmon there? 2% of optimal lineups? Yeah, after that, it gets really, really rough.
Yeah, and we'll get into all that. Let's actually start with guard. So I was going through some of this stuff today, and I think it's only fair. This is not a 1-to-1 here. It's also not apples to oranges either. I think you can use Goran Dragic from last season kind of as a proxy for Kyle Lowry in a situation like this. If you're going back to 2020 and seeing what it looks like without Jimmy Butler. But if we're talking guards first, and today's show presented by Yahoo, by the way, we'll get into an amazing promo later in this show. If you're going with what we saw from last season up until this season, you take Goran Dragic out of this, and you look at somebody like Kyle Lowry. Now, lower usage rate, no doubt about it, but still similar assist rate, similar per minute production to Dragic from last year if you're using him as a proxy. I definitely think it benefits Lowry. And the numbers may not jump off the page, but you have to understand that when you take Butler off the floor, it takes away not only facilitating work, but also just strictly ball handling duty. How many touches are you going to get? So, I mean, guys like Tyler Hero, who has been very good with Butler off the floor, 27.5% usage rate dating back to the start of last season. You have to look at guys like Lowry. You have to look at guys like Tyler Hero against the Clippers.
Yeah, and I was looking at the same thing. The usage rate for Lowry really isn't very good. 16.4% usage rate over the last 10 games. That's basically the whole season. That's 22nd among all guards on the slate. I mean, he is involved other ways, but one thing I noticed is that on our player props tool, I saw, it might have changed just a little bit with this news, but there was a 77% chance that Lowry has the under on 16.5 points. Now, I think that's pretty reasonable here. It's not an unreasonable bet for Lowry to get there, especially when we're projecting 36.2 minutes. That's a minute and a half boost from his last 10 games. But I mean, when the math says there's a 77% chance he's going to go underneath, I got to perk up. So right now, his chance of being in optimal lineups looks pretty good, but I got to say Hero definitely looks better. That's why he's popping. And our leverage score for Hero is just off the charts right now, 9.9% on DraftKings.
Shamar Womack, welcome to the team, brother. It's a sexy looking badge you got there. I got one of those too. Yeah, look, this is being that it's a late game does make things a little bit more difficult. There's no denying that, but you're going to get a ton of ownership. Now, let me update. Let me see if we got updated ownership here. I mean, it's still pretty fresh. So let's see. 10 minutes ago, we do. Obviously, we still have Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo as guys that are expected to be in. Tyler Hero pulling the highest ownership on DraftKings, 46%. Kyle Lowry getting the highest on FanDuel at 53%. He's 6,500. But the top four projected owned players on FanDuel, top four, are all from the Miami Heat. Lowry, Robinson, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, three of whom have guard eligibility. And then over on our sponsor, Yahoo, a little bit different here, but Lowry, 36%, Hero, 29%. And a lot of that is because it's easier to play guys because super cheap guys like $10, $11, there's just more minimum salary guys over at Yahoo that make it a bit easier. But Duncan Robinson, too, is somebody that I think has to stand out as like, okay, he's minimum salary. Okay. Duncan Robinson is minimum salary on Yahoo. On DraftKings, he's 3,800, right? FanDuel, 3,900. You're getting a massive discount. Let's not fool ourselves though, Matt. He is very much a scoring dependent player. He got 45 minutes last game, of which 5 came in overtime. Jimmy Butler was out after the first quarter, shot 4 for 16. And he had 4 stocks. He had 9 rebounds and assists combined and 12 points. He got you there. It's just not often that he's going to get you there with those type of peripherals. But at this price point, given that he's going to play an easy 30, probably mid 30s in minutes, it's tough to get away from even a scoring dependent player like Robinson.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing low salary, high projected minutes, not crazy good points per minute here, actually pretty bad, but it's a high pace of play expected in this game. And yeah, when you look at projections compared to salary-based expectations, Duncan Robinson's already jumping off the page for me. He's 12th among guards in projection and 21st in salary. And so while the ownership is starting to creep up there, his percentage of being in the optimal lineups is pretty high here on both sites. I mean, you could do a lot worse than 3,800, especially if we need to pivot away. Yeah, as you said, it's just so hard to get away from this game that I'm not going to do it. And so I'm probably going to balance high salary options like Paul George and then get to Duncan Robinson a little bit over the field probably. Although his leverage score is kind of low at minus 5.3 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think probably one of the reasons for that is just the fact that when it's, what did you say? Yeah, 5 point. Yeah, it's low because 40% ownership here. He really doesn't have as high a bust probability as I would have thought, but that's just because he's so cheap. But God, you're gonna pull a lot of ownership on a 3-game slate when you're this discounted.
Exactly.
And the number one player on your team is sidelined for the day. It's just, I guess the question, Matt, is if you're looking at guard pivots, are there any pivots at the guard position that make sense where you're like, you know what? Not only does this give me leverage away from a very popular option, a very chalky option like Robinson, but they have the ability to outproduce him enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is a more expensive option. You could do Fred VanVleet, something like that. I don't hate that play. 8,400 on DraftKings. You look at him, he's obviously the top guard in our projections, but he's third in salary. So I still think of him as a value. It's sort of the same thing, though. His leverage score is a little bit lower. It gets tough. It gets really tough in these small slates. So really what I'm trying to prioritize is just these high, solid pay-up options. And then if I'm playing multiple lineups, I'm just rotating these low salary guys in and out.
Savoya Boy says, my wife's boyfriend watches NBA with me. You got it all figured out, fella. That's interesting stuff there. Surely this is not serious. I would hope not. But in the event that it is, I don't know, to each your own. The Fred VanVleet play that you brought up, this to me is one of the more interesting plays because just in general, Fred VanVleet hasn't been like, he's been a tick above a fantasy point per minute guy this year, but there are a few things that stand out about him that always make him interesting. You guys know I've done a lot of NBA shows. Adam and I do a lot of shows together on the Deeper Dive. If you're getting the volume, I don't really care what your production has looked like. Obviously price, you have to contextualize its salary. All of that plays in ownership. But with Fred VanVleet, we know he's a good player. We know that Lowry's gone. We know that Pascal Siakam is out tonight. All of that factoring in. And I'll do you one better. The fact that the Philadelphia 76ers, who were, for several years running one of the top defenses in the league, are not that same elite defense this year. Matter of fact, the Sixers are in defensive rating. I think they're like in the middle of the league.
They're 18th. They're 18th this year.
Yeah. 18th in defensive rating. It's really been their offensive rating that has been so impressive. 113.9 offensive rating, best in the league for Philadelphia, right? Before they were good at both, but they were hovering around like 103 defensive rating, which 103 points allowed per 100 possessions is very low, very good. With Fred VanVleet, you don't have Ben Simmons in there defensively. You're looking at like Tyrese Maxey and Seth Curry type guys, assuming he's active in the backcourt. And again, Matisse Thybulle is another one of those options that can guard the number one ball handler for opposing teams. And he's still out in COVID protocol. So this went from before the season, before all this Ben Simmons bullshit, looked like an awful matchup. Now you look at it and you say, this is actually a really good spot for VanVleet. And you get to the rack easier. If you're getting drives to the rim, yeah, Drummond's a good rebounder, but he's no Ben Simmons and no Joel Embiid, and he's certainly not a good defender around the basket. This just appears to be a great spot for VanVleet if he's going to get close to 40 minutes again.
Yeah, the only thing that really concerns me is the pace of play here, but still the implied total a little low, but exactly what you said. The defensive rating really dropping. And then what do we really expect this version of the Philadelphia 76ers defense to be? So for me, I look at VanVleet over the last 5 games, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. That's 7th among guards. 1.05 over his last 10. That's 5th among guards. And you're talking about a player who's 3rd among guards in salary. It's not an egregious play by any means. And then he's in the optimal lineup 24% of the time. I think it's something where even though the leverage score is lower, I think the usage percentage could go up here. His true shooting percentage, it's been okay this year, 57% over the last 10 games, but it's just even in boom percentage, over 15% boom percentage, this is someone I'm targeting, especially if we have more and more uncertainty related to that Miami guard situation.
Sean says Fred VanVleet sucks in this arena. He has like one good game at Philly. Look, Philly can be a tough place to play, but I'm not reading into that at all, to be honest with you. Sixers have played a lot of games recently. They've had back-to-backs and they've had 2 back-to-backs in a handful of days. They're without Embiid. There's no Ben Simmons. there's no Matisse Thybulle. I'll take that over worrying about a matchup in a certain arena. So
Is that like pitcher and batter and ballpark stats? Are we doing this now?
Yeah. I mean, like, oh God, this batter's awful in AT&T or Oracle Stadium. It's because it's the shittiest park for hitters in the league. There's context to everything. And that's not something that I really think about too often. Although Niang did say in an interview the other day, why are they playing so well? And he goes, well, we're afraid of the fans. And Simmons said the same thing. Turns out that Simmons really was afraid of the fans. Niang seems like he's not too worried. But yeah, Van Vliet's ownership is certainly
you gotta have a certain charisma and chutzpah to deal with the Philadelphia media.
Yeah.
And we don't see it often, but
there was a goalie by the name of Ilya Brizgalov that played for the Philadelphia Flyers, came over from the Phoenix Coyotes, is like this prized goaltender. And one of the reasons he didn't want to play anymore is like, I just hate the fans so much. He sucked in Philly, never succeeded. It takes certain type of mental fortitude. And Joel Embiid has it. I'll give it to my boy JoJo for sure. Iverson had it, right? Those are the type of guys. Hey, what about Donnie Mitchell? What about Spider Mitchell today? His usage rate is through the roof this year, man. I mean, if you're looking for guys to just go off sheer volume and are also obviously very good basketball players, Donovan Mitchell has to stand out among the top options on a 3-game slate. He's got a 35.4% usage rate this year, a 30.6% assist rate, which is way higher than before, or than we've ever seen with him. Like, these are solid numbers on somebody that can rip off, 40 real points any given night, facing a Pacers team that is bottom 10 in defensive rating this season.
Yeah, I think in the deeper dive Adam Scherer does every day, first of all, incredible article, gets you so set for every slate. It is the number one pay up option, Donovan Mitchell. I'm seeing the same thing you are. Guard number one in usage rate, up at 35% over the last 10 games. And he's doing that in 33 minutes or so. That's only 9th among guards. So if he gets a little more usage, we're actually projecting him for about 30.5, which is 2.5 minutes less than he's averaged over the last 10 games. I mean, the points per minute numbers have been just fantastic. 1.42 over his last 5 games. Over the season, it's 1.3. And we're projecting him kind of conservatively at 1.26 per minute. Yeah, I don't get how you get away from Donovan Mitchell, even at 9K on DraftKings. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be absolutely with the field. And I'm just checking out. Yeah, I'm over right now.
You are over on Mitchell?
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, and Shane brought up a point here, we can't play everybody, right? So there are going to be some casualties of this slate. By the way, O Genius says, if I went to a Philly game, I would wear my Cowboys jersey because I want the smoke. Just do me a favor, hit me up so I can come down and watch that. Something doesn't always happen, but oftentimes things happen. I still say the Dodger Stadium's worse, at least outside of it. But I don't know.
Well,
maybe
no one's paying attention to the game.
Yeah, I don't know, man. You hear about.
I'm sorry. I don't mean that, LA fans. I'm sure
you hear about.
There. I've never actually been.
No, you hear some wild. Maybe LA fans could tell me what the craziest story they've seen out of Dodger Stadium is. I saw one at SoFi Stadium the other day where a dude just rocked 2 guys over the railing, knocked them both out. They fell down the steps, and one guy stepped on his head trying to walk up the stairs. I mean, that's some savage stuff. So, everyone hates on Philly fans that talks about batteries and stuff and snowballs at Santa, but go out there in Southern California. Stuff gets wild too. Do you like Gary Trent today? Because Shane had said, I looked at Mitchell, but Gary Trent is cheaper, and he's not wrong. And there's no Pascal Siakam. And again, good matchup against Philadelphia. He's probably going to play 36, 37 minutes.
Yeah, we got him projected for 35.5. So I'm there with you. And at 5K, yeah, it's a totally different proposition here because you only need about 25 for 5X value. He's projected for 27.45 on DraftKings. That's 8th among guards. And while he's 14th in salary, yeah, absolutely. He's a really strong value play. I was really surprised to actually see him 3rd among guards at 31.9% of optimal lineups. Again, that was at the start of the show, so we may have had an update here. But yeah, that's just fantastic. He's clearly the computer's favorite value play. If you need a 5K player, it wants you to go for Gary Trent.
Yeah. I mean, let me point one thing out too, Matt. This is a slate that has all low totals. Okay. All of these teams either play slow or good defensively. For example, like the Indiana Pacers, they are not good defensively, but they average 98 possessions per 48. That's a pretty slow team. Okay. Miami's 27th in pace. Toronto is 29th in pace, and Philly is 30th in pace, right? These teams play slow. The Clippers are the Clippers are the only top 10 pace team that we've got tonight. The Utah Jazz are what? I mean, they're 24th. So Jazz, Heat, Sixers, Raptors, and Pacers are all bottom 8 in pace this year.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing so many Miami players really sneak to the top of these projected ownerships and projected optimals. I want a piece of that game. Hey, NBA is usually a sport unlike NFL where we don't have to target game environments, where we don't need huge correlations, but we can't really get away from it when there are only 3 games and 6 teams. So it kind of frees you up a little bit. Do whatever you want. If you're crunching lineups in Fantasy Cruncher and you see 3, even 4 players from a team, if it is especially those faster paced games, you can do it in these smaller slates. There's only so many players to go around.
Any other guards that stand out to you that make a lot of sense? You've got Reggie Jackson pulling a lot of ownership on FanDuel. The crazy thing is, despite this only having 3 games, it's still a pretty deep slate. Like Jackson, 25% on DraftKings. He's up there on Yahoo as well. Mike Conley. I mean, you get into some of these really low owned guys that I don't think you need to get to. I think you can still be different, even paying up for some guys that might be lower owned. But Malcolm Brogdon's one I think could be really tough to get to today, even with Karis LeVert out.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of Brogdon. Who I do have is Eric Bledsoe, though. I think you could do a lot worse at 4,700. When I'm looking at it right now, if you just compare optimal percentage to ownership percentage, which is essentially what we do for our leverage score, no one's really looking better right now. A 10% leverage score is first among guards. And he's in the optimal lineup 30% of the time. That's how you get a high leverage score. The projected minutes over 30, and we're projecting him for about 4 more minutes than typical here. The points per minute numbers, it's Eric Bledsoe. It's the last 10 games, 0.88 over the season, 0.83. We're projecting him right there at 0.88. It's really the matchup versus Miami and making it possibly easier than it would be for guards typically with Butler out. So, I mean, typically I wouldn't be on a player facing the backcourt of the Heat, but I think Eric Bledsoe is fine this week at 4,700.
Matt, what do you think the worst fan base in sports is?
The worst fan base in sports?
The most worst savage,
subjective.
Neanderthals.
Okay. Oof. Raiders.
Yeah? Okay.
Well, old school like Oakland or LA.
I like that. I want to know why Boston never gets any hate. There's always something going on out there, you know? Yeah. Boston.
I hate to be like talk about the elephant in the room, but I think a lot of people's first answer is Philly, but we can't
no doubt.
say
Seth Curry active.
Okay.
And will start.
Breathe. Good.
Yep. You know, everyone says Philly, and it's warranted to some. I hate that shit. I hate going in there and watching people ruin somebody's day because they're wearing different colors. Although, if you go in there wearing different colors, you probably don't even like sports because everybody knows it's not. Or you got some balls on you, and for that,
you want that smoke is what it really is.
Right, and then they don't though. Like it's 67,000 against 1 generally doesn't work out, but. The Trashers. That's a great answer, Joshua. The Trashers. Did you see that crime and penalties? We got to keep going here, but It's on Netflix. It's an amazing
Oh,
documentary.
you told me about that. Yeah, we got to check that. I got to check that out.
Dude, a mob boss buys a minor league hockey team and gives it to his 17-year-old son to run it, and they were good. It was nuts. That answer wins. That answer absolutely wins. And thanks for getting us to 500 likes, guys. We're at 497, but
Appreciate
it's inevitable at this point. Hey, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. For those of you guys that are new to this channel, welcome. Glad to have you. If you haven't signed up for Yahoo yet, wait to do so until I tell you how to do it. If you use the link in the description or the one that our wonderful producer Jordan Klein's about to put in the chat right now, hear me out. Free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, $90 value. That's everything on the site. Football, basketball, baseball's over, but hockey, MMA, PGA, UFC, that's MMA. Esports, everything. If they have contests, we have content for it. We have all of the Yahoo tools and the boom bust tool, the ownership, the player projections, everything. The lineup builder, fantasy cruncher add-on, all of these tools outside of fantasy cruncher, of course, built by the #1 ranked DFS player out there, Awesemo himself. So check it out, man. All you have to do is use the link and deposit $10 or more and enter a paid contest. They'll give you $10 in credit back too when you deposit that 10. They'll send your info to us. We'll hit you up, get you hooked up. We'll get you in the premium Discord, into the office hours chat where you have the pros answering your questions all the time. Everything, $90 value, free. Just use that link, deposit $10, and of course, enter a paid contest, and you'll be hearing from us. If you already signed up at Yahoo, I would definitely suggest using the promo code NBA Live, all one word, all caps, at awesemo.com/join. Get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus, every sport, not just basketball. So head over to Yahoo, check that out. Some huge contests lately, and I think they're only going to keep getting bigger, right? There's no reason they wouldn't. They're growing, but there's still an edge there over these other sites. I'm telling you, there's still an edge there, particularly in cash games. They got the 100K baller tonight, the $1 million baller coming up for NFL. Just some big contests. So check it out. If you're playing NBA over there tonight, 50K baller, 10K
they got CSV upload. They
CSV
got the
uploads.
switching. Yep.
All of that stuff. So use the link and we'll reach out to you once you follow those steps. All right, Matt, let's talk about some forwards here. And then we'll get into the center position, which if Adebayo sits, I'm a sucker for Dwayne Dedmon, man. That guy, when he gets starts, is just deadly, even if he only plays 24 minutes or so. But at the forward position, we'll start with Paul George. I know he has shooting guard eligibility in spots too, but you got to work with what we have here. He's going to get ownership today, but that's because he's been fantastic. And he's not just a scorer. He has a 12% rebound rate. He has an assist rate close to 30%. He gets it done on all fronts with Kawhi Leonard off the floor.
Yeah, we're not concerned about Paul George at all in this matchup. The projection is right there with that 5x value. First among forwards in projection and first among forwards in salary. First among forwards in optimal lineup percentage. We just go with the math here. We can play him if you want. As people who've watched my matchups marathon show know, projection in line with salary-based expectations, that means we can play him. Hey, the projected minutes are higher than his last 10 games, about a minute and a half more projected right now. And we're projecting him for basically the same thing as his last 5 games fantasy points per minute average, which isn't quite as good as his last 10 games fantasy points per minute average, where he was up all the way at 1.46, even down at 1.38. So terrible. He's the first among forwards. I'm definitely over the field. On DraftKings right now, the ownership coming in around 36%. I will be over the field on that with Paul George.
Guillaume says position by position, and correct me if I pronounced that wrong. I probably butchered it. Yeah, we go position by position here because the deeper dive on right before us, leading up with the hour, they go game by game. So we try and encapsulate everything. We want to give you everything we can. I do want to ask though, before we keep going, because I kind of just brushed over it. The Sixers are starting Maxey, who's been playing a ton of minutes lately. I don't see his minutes really getting curtailed all that much with Seth Curry back in the mix. He's played 37, 45, 44, 39, and 39. I think Paul Reed suffers the most. But Maxey, even in the last game where Curry was active, he played 39 minutes. So I still see this being a case where Maxey gets a lot of minutes. I did want to ask you about him, although his price is up quite a bit before I forget about that. And how do you see this Curry news affecting, having a ripple effect on the rest of the team?
Yeah, I think that Seth Curry is clearly going to play. If they say he's going to start, then that means that he's probably going to get his normal minutes, which is why we're projecting Maxey to have about 3 minutes less in the game than his last 10 games average, which was up around 35 minutes. You said it. He's been averaging pretty high up there. But when his minutes go down, he's just pretty unimpressive from a points per minute standpoint. 15th among guards over the last 5 games, 17th among guards. Again, those are just on this slate in his last 10 games. And then you're talking about a player who's 6th among guards in salary. Yeah, I mean, the projection's kind of right there, but it's just not a priority.
I agree. I think he's too expensive. I like Maxey. He can get to the rack, but with Tobias Harris back in the mix, and it's going to be tough. If people, there was someone that said Maxey will shoot less with Curry back. I don't really think that's the case necessarily, because you had Korkmaz jacking up every shot he could, right? Like those shots were distributed elsewhere, not just to Maxey. But yes, with Harris back, he'll definitely see lower usage, which is a perfect segue to somebody like Tobias Harris, Matt. And I am still uncertain what his minutes are going to look like. And I totally agree with Greg. I mean, he didn't sugarcoat a thing. He called Doc Rivers a bald-faced liar on the stream, which is pretty funny. Harris is expected to play. That's good. Was dealing with COVID. And Doc said he has to go through his usual pregame routine before officially getting the green light to play. All indications are that Harris will be back in the lineup, with final confirmation likely to come soon. So that's the good thing. The question being, though, how many minutes does he play? Because we've seen players return from COVID. This was during the bubble days. And then early in last season, I can't remember the specifics. Chat could probably help me out here because they have a better memory than mine. Mine's of a goldfish. But there were some players that returned and were noticeably slowed by lingering effects. Most of these professional athletes in peak physical condition don't even know probably wouldn't even know they had it not been for testing, right? Let's be honest. But some of them, feel some effects and then it ends up lingering. And I heard, I don't know, but I mean, if that's the case with Tobias, all I'm saying is it's tough from a conditioning standpoint with something that affects your lungs. It is kind of a weird spot to guess what his playing time is going to look like. Am I wrong?
This is impossibly difficult. And this is where I am just going to cede to the projections, cede to the math. And you know what? The math, or at least our projections, simply just put him at his current minutes average. 33 minutes, which is right at his last 10 games played average of 33.4 minutes. That would be fifth among all forwards. And he's fourth among all forwards on this slate in usage percentage. So assuming he gets that normal workload, Harris looks like a really, really great play. 1.12 fantasy points per minute over the last 5 games, a little bit lower over the last 10. And what I'm seeing is that he's in the optimal lineup 18.6% of the time, and has a super high leverage score, a plus 6.7%. That's second among all forwards. Again, I guess the range of outcomes is different for a player coming off the COVID protocol than really anything we've seen. So you can take that into consideration. And there are other pay up options at the 9K range on DraftKings that we probably like a little better. But there's no way I'm saying you can't play Harris. His projection compared to salary just looks too good.
To me, it's kind of simple, right? The ownership right now on Tobias Harris is too low to playing without someone like Embiid. If you actually look at this, Matt, right? If zoom out and take a 30,000 foot view, okay? It's not 100,000 foot view, which everybody said. It's 30,000 feet.
Way too far.
Right, exactly. You're not gonna see shit. Plus 30,000 feet, like you're in an airplane. You know what I mean? Cruising altitude. Come on now. If you're zooming out a 30,000 foot view, it's still probably hard to see things. So I don't even know why they say that now that I think about it in my head. Let's take an aerial view, Matt. A rooftop bird's eye perspective.
Bird's eye view. There we go.
Not bad. Depends how high the bird is, of course. Well, let's assume it's a perched bird. let's take a perched bird's eye view. And I would say that without Embiid and then without Ben Simmons, who is also a very skilled rebounder. And I say Simmons because we haven't seen him much Harris without these guys, without Embiid. And look at the surrounding players. You have Seth Curry, not exactly a stellar ball handler. Tyrese Maxey, sure, but he's not going to be jacking up 20 shots again. And then guys like Niang and Korkmaz, and then Drummond, great rebounder. He'll get some putbacks, but there's nothing intended to get Drummond the ball outside of putback opportunities. So, like, if Harris plays 35 minutes in his return, you might see a 35% usage rate tonight.
Exactly. That's the way I'm sort of seeing it. Is you just got to look at how Philadelphia wants to impact the game. They're going to rotate their guard play. They're going to get their shooters open, and they're going to work the ball through Harris. And I don't think they're going to have a lot of situations where they're running the offense through Drummond. He's going to pick up fantasy points in all the ways that centers do, just cleaning up the boards, blocks, and steals. With Tobias Harris, I mean, this is a great situation where you want to look at player impact estimate, which is just one of those advanced metrics that basically looks at every single stat there is and just gives it a little weight. He's third among forwards on this slate with a 16.5 player impact estimate. So I see Tobias Harris as the feature player on that team. Now, if you don't want to get there in this matchup against Toronto, I understand it, but the only reason I'm not going to Harris is because I prioritize some other 9K player on that lineup.
I hope you guys will be sticking around for NFL Live Before Lock, because it's coming up immediately after this show. We're going up till 7. I think they kick it off at 7:15. You got our boy Ben Rasa, jack of all trades, master of many. Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. And then Neil Orfield, Millie Maker winner. I mean, what a star-studded cast that is. They're taking you up till 8:20 or whenever lock is tonight for the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens. So right now, if you're just looking at forwards, we already covered point guards. If you wanted to go back and catch some of that, you've got guys like Scotty Barnes that per minute wise, he hasn't been spectacular, but for a young player on this team, he's averaging exactly a fantasy point per minute this year. It's hard to not like that, assuming that you get 35 plus minutes out of him tonight. I know this is a slow paced game between the two slowest teams in the league, but what's your recourse? What are your alternatives? Like, you might just have to chalk it up as Sixers defense isn't that good and this game should stay competitive, because I'm going to be getting to some Barnes tonight too.
For sure I'm getting Scotty Barnes. I mean, just look at the projection, 5th among forwards, the salaries 7th among forwards. Then I could probably just play it right there. But then you're talking about one of the highest minutes projections here, 34 projected minutes. That's actually lower than his last 10 games where he's been up around 34.6. And you said it. I mean, especially his last 5 games, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. I mean, super impressive young player. His projection is right in line with a 5x salary. His leverage score is a little low, which means his ownership is creeping up. But again, that's just a feature of a 3-game slate. You're going to only have so many players in this 6 to 7,500 range on DraftKings that are going to start to look appealing. 15.7% boom percentage. I mean, that's 4th among forwards. Yeah, absolutely getting to Scotty Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the super chat, man. He said trying to join and it's sending an error message. So here, that was nice. Maybe we can get that squared away. I mean, it's YouTube's end, but hopefully when you want to, you can. And I can't refund the $5, although I would, but I literally can't. That's okay. Shamar Womack, thanks for the super chat. How do you feel about playing Sabonis? That's a great question. Matt, I feel like when it comes to someone like Sabonis, when we talk about the casualty of a slate, it's not that you can't play him, but this is a tough matchup in the front court for sure. He hasn't exactly been lights out this season. He's been okay, but he hasn't been to Sabonis' standards. And then you have no Karis LeVert. That's significant. But they're big dogs, another low-scoring game against a good Utah defense. And if you're playing Sabonis, that means you have to forego some of these other guys, you know, at least one of George or Mitchell Tobias, which is understandable if you don't want to play him. Andre Drummond, who we'll talk about. Fred VanVleet. So I guess where are you prioritizing someone like Sabonis among the rest of the guys of like 8K and up?
Yeah. I mean, he's not my favorite in that range. I think I'd rather play Donovan Mitchell. I'd rather play Paul George. But, he has a projection in line with salary-based expectation at the
Boom.
center position.
There it is.
We hit it. We hit it.
There it is.
The leverage score, -6.6, that's super, super unappealing. I think he's a solid play in tournaments. That's really what I could say. He's a solid play in tournaments because on paper he looks fine, but there are players at his salary range that look better, which means that might artificially deflate his ownership percentage. He's in the optimal lineup 9.6% of the time, so his ownership coming in around 16% on DraftKings, that's not egregious. That doesn't mean you can't play him. It just means that I want other players more than him in his salary range.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the center position. Before we do, anybody else, and that Drummond question was solid. I will get to that for sure, because I think there are 3 centers on FanDuel that you're really going to want the most of. Yes, they're pulling ownership, but I think you can get different elsewhere. There are 3 centers that make a lot of sense on this slate. 4 kind of, but mostly 3 that really stand out to me. Any other forwards you want to talk about, Matt, at either small forward or power forward?
Yeah, I definitely have some OG Anunoby.
Yeah.
I think that he's a really strong play today. At 7,600, he has projection basically at that 5x value. But really what I see is a projection at forward 3 and a salary at forward 6. 37 projected minutes, just fantastic. And then you're talking about a player who usually is right at 1 fantasy point per minute. I mean, actually really, really consistent. 1 fantasy point per minute exactly over the last 5 games. Over the last 10 games, exactly 1 fantasy point per minute. Over the season, he's at 0.94. We split the difference in our projections. He's at 0.98 fantasy points per minute. For 37 minutes, yeah, you can play that player at 7,600.
Yeah, you got to love it. Jordan Lockhart with the $20 super chat again. Lafayette and Matt, throw me some good luck tonight. Ha. You don't need it. Throw me some good luck, bro. Thanks, though, man. Jeremy Savage says, dude wants to keep winning. Yeah, so he's just tossing super chats like, hey, good karma going to stay on my side. Appreciate you, man. Brad Kaufman with a $5 super chat said, is Banton. So, okay, let me read this. I lost it. Is Banton viable after what Nurse said as him being a last man in? So what is he getting? Like 13 to 14 minutes per game right now?
We have him projected for 17 and a half. I mean, that's pretty solid.
Minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Where's his ownership at?
5.2%. Yeah, he's a fine tournament play. I mean, he's a fun play. He's a 3K player for a reason. I'm encouraged by what Nurse said, but I'm also just putting in the coach speak category until we see a real change. Last 10 games, he's averaging 13.1 minutes per game. That's 29th among guards. His usage percentage, 16.7%, also outside the top 20 guards. So yeah, you're going to need to see a spike in usage for this to make any sense here.
Yeah, maybe you get some foul trouble from one of these other guards and he pulls 20 minutes, but on a permanent basis, he's just shy of a fantasy point per minute. I get it. I mean, look, the likelihood that it works out isn't very high, but 20 from him on this slate might actually be enough. So yeah, I don't think it's a flat out punt. It's crazy. Do I want to be playing him over a guy like Duncan Robinson, who is already going to play 35 plus minutes, and then Tyler Hero might be out? And then I'm like, oh, I got Banton locked. Probably not. But I can see you getting there if you're going full out. I shouldn't say star scrubs, but loading up on those 8K plus guys and trying to get one other option in there. That makes some sense. All right, let's talk about the center position. And hey, 2,500 plus watching right now. Appreciate you guys big time. If you haven't hit that thumbs up, go to 700. We got 68 to go before 700, 12 minutes before lock. We'll talk centers here. Take your questions and then turn it over to the NFL Live before lock. And if nothing, hit that thumbs up for Matt here doing his first NBA show ever, right?
This is my first time talking NBA. Yeah.
Love it. Doing a great job.
It's been awesome.
Man.
It's been fun.
Making things happen. Andre, okay, so there's a question. Can you fade Andre Drummond on FanDuel? Here's what I would say. You can, yes, definitely, because you're only playing one center. And you have Precious Achua, who is cheap, without Siakam, without Kem Birch, good spot. Then you have Bam Adebayo, who has been, wildly successful player without Jimmy Butler and is actually a good facilitating big man when you take a guy like Butler off the floor. Again, I think you can use Dragic as a proxy for Lowry being on the floor now and get a good gauge of what Adebayo's assist rate will look like. But he produces across the board. Those three guys to me are really interesting. If you wanted to go to one or the other of those, I have no issues with that. I think Rudy Gobert is totally fine as well at his price. So center tonight, despite the abbreviated set of games, center's actually pretty stacked among the top options.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. And you said it best, especially on FanDuel. When you look at our optimal lineup percentage, there's a cluster of 3 players. So I don't care which one you pick. And they're all in different salary tiers a little bit. Bam Adebayo, Precious Achua, as you said, and Andre Drummond. Gobert is a distant 4th, almost half the optimal lineup probability as those 3.
Pedro, why is Tobias Harris's boom percentage so low? Thanks in advance. What's his boom percentage at?
Oh, I just lost it. Hold up.
I got you. So he is at 7%. Yeah. So we're clearly
it's probably
not
because the salary's high.
Yeah, his salary's up there. Again, this is like strictly a tournament play. And even here, it doesn't look good for tournaments, but in the event that he does get regular minutes, and we have no idea how he's affected by COVID. Yes, I would say it's low. He's a low probability play at that price point. Oh, we got the bots in action, the thumbs down bots. Sweet. Rabashua, thank you for the super chat, man. Rabashua been around for a long time in the Awesemo streets. Laffy, Drummond 3rd and 4 nights. How tired does he get? And do you think it increases his chances of busting? That's the thing, man. I was saying they played they played back-to-back games. Drummond and we were right about this. Drummond's playing time was curtailed a bit against Milwaukee, 38-33. I still think you get around 35 minutes from Drummond tonight. It's early in the season. This is not a guy who hasn't played a lot of minutes in his career. It's not like he's a career backup. So I don't worry too much about like how much he's affected by some additional minutes. Plus, he hasn't been playing a ton of minutes, but he's still conditioned, obviously.
Yeah, I just don't know where else they go with these minutes, too. They just are kind of hampered here in terms of what they really can do. It's possible that we see him play less minutes, but yeah, the minute spike is inevitable, in my opinion, until Joel Embiid comes back.
Nicholas says, and this is a relevant statement we can hit on, it's all about Turner tonight, boys. Y'all sleeping. Yeah, well, Turner is, for me, kind of 5th in the list of priorities. He's that's bared out by ownership as well. Where are you at on somebody like Miles Turner at his price?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with him at 7K. I have other priorities usually there, but projection is center 4, 4th among centers, and he's 5th in centers in salary. 28 minutes is kind of low, and so you really need him to have his recent efficiency, which has been fantastic over the last 5 games. His 1.4 fantasy points per minute, that's 1st among all centers. That's great. And even over the last 10, which again is most of the season, it's 3rd among centers. But I think where we have him projected at 1.07 is closer to more realistic. So I see what you're seeing. He's really solid in player impact estimate, 4th among centers. So again, it's just all kind of right in line with salary-based expectations. So it's not a big value. You could play him.
Yeah, I think you can. We had another question. Thank you for the super chats, guys. Jordan Lockhart, this is for all Awesemo members for good luck. Oh, he's trying for sure. Darusha says, especially with Bam being questionable, where do we stand on PJ Tucker? Dude, PJ Tucker will be the bane of your existence. He's coming into a game or out of a game where he just played 38 minutes, of course, 5 of them in overtime. But I mean, generally speaking, PJ Tucker is going to be one of the lowest fantasy point per minute producers there is. That in mind, though, Matt, could this be, could you see them be? Could you see Spoelstra willing to go a little bit smaller at center, being that there are no dominant offensive inside presence? There is no dominant offensive inside presence for the Clippers at center position, which is true, right? Is it possible that Tucker could get additional minutes tonight if Bam is out? Yeah, he's still PJ Tucker though. You're literally just hoping that because he's so cheap that PJ Tucker will knock down the shots that he gets and fall face first into a couple of opportunities as in terms of peripherals. But he's getting around 10% ownership on DraftKings.
Yeah, I will say that he is popping in the optimal lineup. At least as of when we went live, he had a positive leverage score. So you at 3,100. He probably isn't going to make or break your lineup here. So what's his probability of getting to that ceiling score? I think the boom percentage of 7.4% is accurate. And, that's actually third amongst centers. So I do kind of get it. But I remember the boom percentage is relative to a player's salary. So it's much easier for a 3,100 player to boom than, say, a 7,100 player. Still, you can play a 30-minute player in a 3-game slate. You can, but I'm not super excited about one that averages 0.56 fantasy points per minute over the last 5 games.
So one guy on Odds Shopper, Jordan, if you want to pull this up so everybody can see it, so this is crazy. We've got him projected for almost 2 rebounds less than his prop. We have an 83% expected win rate, expected ROIs at 52% on him on rebounds. Hassan Whiteside. I mean, Hassan Whiteside is one of the best per minute players out there, hands down. And I'll get to your super chats and questions in just a second, but I did want to hit on him because I think if this was any other short slate, Hassan Whiteside would actually be very popular because 18 to 20 minutes from a guy like Whiteside, 17, 19. He got 23 yesterday, can be pretty valuable for someone that's averaging well over a fantasy point per minute this year and pretty much always. But man, we have him projected for 5.7 rebounds. This prop is 7.5. So that is a big gap in where we have him projected compared to where he stands on these books right now. That seems like a good spot to hit on the under, but he has been pretty productive in his opportunities off the bench, at least from an efficiency standpoint. It's just hard to get him in with all of those options, particularly Precious Achiuwa being a similarly priced value play.
Yeah, I like Precious better, no question about it. But yeah, it comes down to, with a player like Whiteside, the efficiency is there from a point per minute standpoint, but we don't project the minutes to be available. I don't, again, saying I don't like the matchup in a 3-game slate is all relative because it just means I'm prioritizing the player slightly less. I'm not going away from anyone. It's just not something that I really see sticking out to me. Optimal lineup 1.3% of the time. It's okay if you have no Whiteside tonight.
Yeah, man, watch. He's going to be the difference. People are going to play Whiteside. He's going to play. The people that play Whiteside over Precious Achiuwa, just watch, right? Like they blow out the Pacers, okay, right? They blow the Pacers out. Whiteside comes in, gets 24 minutes, and just erupts off the bench against a bad Pacers defense. Man, I'm with you though. Like it's not
impossible, but every bit
not the
of
optimal play at all.
Projections point to Achiuwa being the better play.
Oh, he's a way better play. I'm not denying that. He's a way better play. I'm just saying they're the same price. That happens all the time on slates like these. Hey guys, any questions you got before we head out? We got a couple minutes, so we can make this happen. We got around 2.5 minutes. Let's do it. Manny C, Awesemo bringing in the weekend early. Always great times, gentlemen. Thank you, bro. Matt.
Hey, we should talk about late swap. It's always important, even in a 3-game slate. We mentioned it briefly. Just get your later game players into those lower spots. And sometimes the optimizers don't do it correctly. Cruncher's been excellent about it, though, I will say. But we have some late news that we have to watch out for past 7 p.m. Create some optionality in your lineups. Of course, that's going to happen naturally because you're not stacking just one 7 p.m. game here. But make sure that you are staying active with your lineups as these games go on. You don't want to play the chalk if your lineups are dead in the water.
And make sure if you're hand building, again, I said it at the beginning, I'll say now, if you make sure that if you're hand building lineups, you have all of if you're hand building lineups, that the guys in the 1030 spot, whether it be Bam, whether it be Tyler Hero or Duncan, any of them, if you can, make sure they are in the spots that give you more options. If news comes out, the utility, the guard or forward spots, if you put them in your shooting guard spot or just your center spot, you're limited to, you're going to have to go from like Bam to Dwayne Dedmon, or Bam to Ivica Zubac. And you're not going to want to do that. So let's take this Hartenstein in after hours on FanDuel, Matt. Ugh,
sure.
After hours, of course. So it's not all the games. I think it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine, man. Probably at 15, 20 minutes. Right now we have him at 15.3 projected minutes. And, it's a pretty solid 1.25 fantasy points per minute. That's fifth among all centers on this slate. In the late one, yeah, I get it.
I think it's viable because he's power forward and not center eligible. So it gives you a lot more options there. If it was center eligible and you're losing out on a lot of the best plays on the slate, even in the later slate, that would probably make things a whole lot less appealing. But hey, almost at 100 dislikes because of the bots. So thanks. Let's get to 700 likes. The thumbs down, same engagement. The YouTube algorithm reads it the same anyway. But thanks to all of you guys.
I heard they're getting rid of them.
What's up?
I heard they're getting rid of public-facing dislikes.
That's dumb. I'll take the bots and the people that don't like us hitting the thumbs down any day of the week before they take away thumbs down. I think it's dumb. And nobody can take any criticism these days, Matt. That's the problem. They got rid of the thumb.
I just told you what I heard.
You're right. I saw it too. They got rid of the rating system on Netflix because people were upset that their favorite comedians weren't funny. Just saying. We need to know what's good and bad in this world. Don't hide shit from us. Am I right? No. I don't know.
I think it's okay to like what you like sometimes, but how about we just get the downvoting bots, get something better to do with whatever human is running those bots' lives.
Yeah, whatever it is. But like I said, fuck them. We got some great people. We got some great people in here, man. We got the best community in the world when it comes to DFS. You know what I mean? We do. Yeah. Hands down. Right, Jordan Klein? Shout out to your boy Jordan Klein for producing today's show, as always. We'll be out of here. Good luck to you guys. You're the best. And you're the best. We'll catch you back here soon. Remember, check out Yahoo promo code or the link in the description and in the chat. We'll see you guys back here. So go check out Ben and Alex and Neil. Shout out NFL Live Before Lock. Shout out to Matt. First NBA show in the books. We'll keep them going. Good luck tonight, guys. Hit us up at Awesemo HOF. When you win, get that free month of Awesemo with your screenshots. Peace.
See ya.
See ya.